So welcome everyone. People will still be trickling in here, but welcome everyone to the September PSC meeting. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to share a presentation here and we can go over a brief overview of the agenda before handing off. We'll do some introductions and then handing off to Ida for the first topic of the day. So let me go ahead and share this screen. Still loading here. All right, can everyone see that screen?
No.
Beautiful. All right.
Andrew, we can't see
Andrew,
the screen.
We can't see it.
You can't see it?
No.
There it is.
Coming
there we
now.
go.
Something's happening.
All right.
Got
Sorry about that. Must have been a little
All right,
lag.
here we go.
All right. So briefly, just going over the agenda, we're going to start off with some introductions. And then our first topic of the day will be scheduling of submittals, followed by a regional office updates, and then a pretty substantial document update section. After that, we'll do a quick 10-minute break. And when we come back, we'll have legislative updates, code development updates, new initiatives, and then a construction and climate associated challenges discussion. Those questions were sent out in advance, so everyone should be aware of that. And then finally, if there's any member initiated issues or topics of discussion you'd like to raise throughout the meeting, we'll have a section dedicated to that as well. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Ida.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm pleased that we're having another PSCC. I know that we have new members attending today, and I hope that both the new members and also our returning members find this time valuable. We know we take up 3 hours of your time. We like to do this twice a year. Unfortunately, this is our first one this year, and it's been a year since we've convened. But we hope to bring you information and, more importantly, get information from you that can inform our regulations, policies, procedures to improve our collaborative efforts and what we do for you in getting your school buildings built. Welcome, everyone. We've had a busy year. I will also provide a little update in a little bit about how busy our year's been, but I just wanted to say a welcome to everyone, and I will turn it back to you, Andrew, for introductions. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Ida. If we can go through everyone. Eric, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Drever, Principal Architect Headquarters over Architectural Codes and Policies.
Thank you. Alicia?
Hello, everyone. Alicia Chavez, Sustainability Units Supervising Architect here at Headquarters.
Thank you. David?
Hi, I'm David Brown. I'm the Fire and Life Safety Supervisor at the DSA Los Angeles Regional Office.
Thank you, David. Chris?
Good morning, Chris Morton. I'm the Regional Manager in the DSA Oakland office.
Thank you, Chris. Tina?
Good morning, everyone. I am Tina, and I oversee our communications, our academy and certification units, and our metrics units, and interested in learning more about this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron?
Yes, Ron LaPlante, DSA San Diego Regional Manager.
Thank you, Ron. Harlan?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Harlan Raymond. I'm the Regional Manager in the Sacramento office.
Thank you. Gregory?
Good morning, Gregory Kobabe, the future soon-to-be Principal Fire Life Safety Officer at Headquarters.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. Ryan?
Morning, Ryan Turner, Supervising Structural Engineer with Headquarters Structural Codes and Standards.
Thank you. Michelle?
Oh, good morning. Michelle Davis, Supervising Architect, Architectural Codes and Policies, Accessibility Unit.
Thank you, Michelle. Kurt?
Good morning, Kurt Kochnick. I'm the Deputy to the State Architect.
Thank you, Kurt. Diane?
Good morning, everyone. Diane Gould, Principal Structural Engineer, DSA Headquarters Codes and Structural Codes and Standards Unit.
Thank you. And with CAL FIRE, Jenna.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Jenna Garcia. I'm the supervisor over at CAL FIRE Office State Fire Marshal Code Development Analysis. I'm here on behalf of Crystal Sajewski, Chief of Code Development Analysis. She's not able to make it.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Hi,
Thornburg.
everyone. Oh,
Sorry, Jennifer.
which one? I'm Jennifer Thornburg with California Geological Survey.
Thank you.
A senior engineering geologist.
Thank you. Let's go to the PSCC members. Thank you, everyone. Jennifer Mahado.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Mahado. I am with West Valley Mission Community College District in the Facilities and Maintenance Department.
Thank you. Josh Randall.
I was muted. Sorry, Josh Randall, a structural engineer with RTM Engineering Consultants.
Thank you. Phil Armstrong.
Good morning, everybody. Phil Armstrong. I'm Senior Associate with Ground Level Landscape Architecture.
Thank you. Devin Conway.
Good morning, Devin Conway, Principal with Verde Design. I'm the Civil Engineering Representative.
Thank you. Representing Geotechnical Engineer on behalf of Eric Swenson is Jeremy Zorn.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Jeremy Zorn with Geocon here in Sacramento. We're a geotechnical engineering and consulting firm.
Thank you. Buddy Gessel.
Hi, good morning. Buddy Gessel, architect and principal with DLR Group. I'm based out of San Diego.
Thank you. Laura Noss.
Hi, everyone. Laura Noss. I'm president of Lionakis and AIA California Vice President of Government Relations.
Thank you. And Josh Randall.
I think I already went, but I'll go again. Josh Randall, structural engineer, RTM Engineering Consultants.
All right, so I think that covers the existing members. I want to warmly welcome 3 new members to the PSCC, and we're excited to have them join us. The first is Steve Schneider, who is a Fire Life and Safety Representative and a Director of Fire Protection and Life and Safety Engineering at Max Acupo Associates, and he brings a wealth of experience in fire protection systems, code compliance, and hazard analysis. His leadership in the national code development and local fire safety policy will be a tremendous asset to the PSC, so welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
And next we have Ara Bakor de la. She joins us as a School Facilities District Development Representative, and with over 26 years of experience in educational facilities planning and development. She currently leads major capital development and bond programs for the New Point Mesa Unified School District, and her hands-on leadership in delivering complex and high-impact projects will greatly enrich our discussions. Welcome, Ara.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And finally, Nick Moreau joins us as a general contractor representative. As CEO of Neff Construction, Nick brings over 2 decades of experience in school construction and risk management. His innovative approaches to project delivery and a deep understanding of construction and challenges will be invaluable to the PSCC as we move forward. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
All right. And that concludes the introductions. I will get this PowerPoint going and let me know if you guys can see that. Or can't see that. And with that, I'd like to hand it to Ida for the scheduling of submittals. Let me just get over there, and there we are. If you could take control.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. A little bit. Thank you, Andrew, and welcome to, again, all our new members. A little bit about how busy we are before I get to the 2025 submittals. We have since July 1st, our fiscal year, we've received $921 million in construction. Consistently, in the past 6 years, we've averaged about 9 to 10 billion. And last year, the last fiscal year, 24-25, we were at 11.82 billion. The number of projects actually went down, but either the size of the projects went up or just the cost construction went up. But we're still busy processing year after year, numerous volumes of school construction. It's been consistently busy. Work on our desks. In August, we received $0.047 billion in school construction. We're working through those submittals now. And this month in September, we've also received $1.49 billion in construction and in projects. And so we're also starting to work through those. So getting a look ahead in October, we're presently at about $835 million in construction that we anticipate coming in October. Those numbers vary a little bit because some projects are not submitted on time when they're planned. Others try to get back in queue to get submitted. I will say that while 835 million is a little low, we anticipate it's only going to be the lull before the November and December rush of projects prior to the new code coming in. While we don't believe there are significant changes in the 2025 code that affect a lot of our work, a new code change does still require familiarity with new code requirements, even if they don't have a significant impact. And so there's always a rush to get projects in before the new code takes effect January 1st, 2026. So again, we're anticipating a very high volume of projects in November and December coming in this year. Part of that is also because $42 billion in state and local bonds passed in 2024, and those projects that we're starting to see come in right now. As I mentioned, there is a code change coming January 1st. So with that code change, 2025 CBC submittals will be accepted beginning December 1st. So you do have the option to adopt the new code a month early for your projects in the sense of submitting them in. We will begin review of them after to the new code as they are in queue. And I will give just a couple priority notifications. LA schools that are affected by fire do have priority processing. That's been our commitment to LAUSD and Pasadena USD so that they can get their students back in permanent facilities as quickly as possible. The 2022 approved California Building Code pre-check projects, which are usually it's all pre-check projects, but the modular and relocatable buildings are a significant number. Those can be used in projects through 2026. And that gives us a little bit of time to review the new modular buildings to the 2025 code, which is in effect next year. I always get those numbers twisted. And so you can use the already approved 2022 pre-check projects through December 31st, 2026. And of course, any administrative code changes that came in the 2025 code, they're now published, but they have been in effect since April 2025. So that's a little bit about our project workload and also how we're processing submittals. You will likely be receiving, depending on how many projects we get in, you will likely be receiving our customary message that we send out when it's a code change. That indicates there may be a delay from our usual processing times, and to have a little bit of patience as we work through them. We have already been submitting some projects to our consultant contracts. We've been amping up staff with retired annuitants, but we really are unable to hire new staff on a temporary basis except for retired annuitants. And we do have to request new staff through a formal process, which is very difficult to do. So we manage our workload with our existing staff, with retired annuitants, with consultant contracts, and with overtime. And will be implementing all those moving forward. However, there is likely still a message that will be coming out saying to have a little bit of patience as we work through our workload. It does take us till about March, April to level out and get into a normal groove again as we work through those projects. The other benefit is that we do have lower fees that started September 1st of this year. So now all projects that are submitted do have lower DSA plan review fees for access and structural are applied. So all those projects that we have coming in or have registered after September 1st have taken advantage of the reduced fee cost. And with That's all I have on an update of scheduling of submittals. If anyone has any questions, I'll take those now. And I can't, I'm trying to see, Andrew, you can see everyone to see if there is, there you go. Okay, now I see everyone's list. Okay. All righty. And with that, I will pass it to next on the agenda, which is Chris Morton to provide a regional office update.
Thank you, Ida. Okay, Oakland has been busy. Everything that Ida has said has indicated we have been reflected in the workload that Oakland has seen. We've seen a gradual actual reduction in work over the summer, which is typical as we have worked through the summer submittals and then work into our upcoming fall workload. I'll get into that in a minute on the next slide. Oakland has had some changes in the supervision and management team in the last year. You may have worked with several of these new individuals already. We have a new supervisor, a supervising structural engineer, Jonathan Chen. His unit is the South region, which is Monterey, San Benito, San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz counties. We also have a new supervisor in access compliance, Manny Buenaventura. And then I have two new supervisors in my business services unit. Lisa Sharp just started with us in September, and David Smith, plan review support, has been with us since March. So you may have already interacted with them either in pre-application meetings, questions, or support when there's been fee questions or issues. Their contact information were all noted on the DSA website, the Contact Us page. The Oakland site has phone numbers and email addresses to contact us. So if there's any questions about particular disciplines, please reach out to them or copy myself and I can work to direct it to them as well. Next slide here is just an overview of workload over the last year. Unfortunately, projecting it ahead, I had to pull it into two slides, so it's a little skewed, but you can see a typical pattern that we see. Workload tends to drop July and into August, and then it starts to ramp back up in the fall. We see a slight lull in January because we see so many projects being submitted by the end of the year, as Ida indicated. Whether it's a code change or not even a code change, we just tend to see a lot of projects getting submitted in November and December as teams and districts look to clear the books on a calendar year and then move forward into the next year. Things ramp back up again in February and March, typically with summer construction submittals. And as those are approved, things tend to drop back down again as we move through the summer. And then we are starting to see a workload ramp back up again in September. We're currently, at the time that I put this together, which was a couple of weeks ago, we were seeing registrations, 52 of them for September at 244 million. So that was not quite reflected yet in the bar chart and the metrics up there, but we're seeing work increasing going forward. We've had a lot of pre-application meetings relating to larger projects and design teams and districts looking for plans on how to get the projects submitted in under the current code, the current 2022 CBC that everyone is familiar with. We anticipate in Oakland that we are going to see that workload increase that Ida has referenced. That's all that I have for Oakland. So Andrew, I'm going to pass it back. I believe Harlan is next.
That's correct. Yep. Harlan, you're up next.
Okay. So I hit the take control button and it told me to exit Spotlight.
That's just the spotlight's just the camera, so everyone could see. Let me share that one more time.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
We put it up there. Just a sec, Harlan. Looks like it. There we go.
Uh-oh, somebody hit the,
Yeah, so if you hit take control, you'll have control now.
okay. So in Sacramento, like Ida and Chris said, we're awfully busy. So this is a screenshot of last fiscal year. In the Sacramento office, we serviced 911 projects for 2.64 billion. Looking ahead, we've got September 178 million coming in, and in October 189 million in new construction coming in. And when I say new construction, so these could be a variety of projects. A lot of them are modernizations and additions to existing campuses. I think we're already starting to see the push towards the end of the year where projects are coming in at a faster rate and larger projects. We do have the ability to contract out, and this morning I met with our 2 structural supervisors, and right now we have 6 ongoing projects with consultant contractors, and we're looking at sending out 4 additional projects in the very near future. It's going to be a banner year, I think. I think we're going to probably end up doing close to 12 or 13 billion dollars statewide over the next few months, or by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. So very busy. I'm going to go back 1 slide to show you our office structure. So we're structured very much the same as Oakland and the other regional offices. We have 2 structural teams, the North and South team. Then we also have Stephen Ito, who supervises our field engineers. Incidentally, our field engineers are carrying about 150 to 180 projects each. These are active construction projects. So they are super busy, going to a lot of job site visits and handling a lot of paperwork like CCDs and field trip notes and all kinds of reports. So very busy. Now we've got, of course, in plan review, we've got our access team under Tim Powell, fire life safety under Dan Deloche, project services, Newton Patel. Now we have 2 business units. The business services, they collect fees and do a lot of the clerical items. And then we also have our plan review, support and registration group under Doris Lorenzo. And I have to hand it to these business groups. They're doing a tremendous amount of work and they're keeping us running smoothly. I think that's all I have for today. And I will pass it off to David.
David, thanks, Harlan. Good morning, everyone. In the Los Angeles regional office, you could hear me tell you a lot of the same themes that you've heard so far about workload and just volume of work. We have a few key things that differ from that. One is we obviously had these very tragic fires at the beginning of the calendar year, and between a combination of projects and project types, we're seeing an increased workload above the workload of everyone trying to beat the code change. And thankfully, we DSA have come up with a strategy where the other 3 regional offices will be helping out Los Angeles with a few large key projects, handling review of those projects through a collaborative process. And that'll reduce the workload in our office slightly. However, our workload is still our 6-week look ahead is around $758 million, which is considerably above normal. And we've been tracking large projects, so projects over $20 million in estimated value through into first quarter of next year. And we're hovering around $3 billion between all project types that we know about that are large projects. So we're expecting the same large workload. We're already using at least one, and we're seeking another retired annuitant in our office and to help with the plan review effort. And we'll be consulting out as soon as we get some projects registered and are able to actually put some meat on the bones of a consultant contract request, probably starting next month. That said, we've also had over the last year and a half, a pretty significant change in our supervisor team. Most of our structural engineering supervisors have, the more senior ones have retired, and so we have a staff that's a lot newer in the supervisor seats for our structural group. CM Len, Hani Freudenberger, and Tyler Liu are all new structural plan review supervisors in the last year and a half. And Robert Liu, who has been around in the field for a long time, has taken the seat for our field review supervisor spot. We also have a new access supervisor, Marjorie Fennell. She's been there for a little over a year. And with the restructuring of our business section statewide, we've also added a second admin staff for our plan review support and registration, Bluebeam processing, that sort of thing. And that's Rachel Roberts. Pretty good churn. We have a lot of seasoned people there, but new in the supervisor seats, but everyone's keeping work flowing, and definitely we're connected with what's going on in the office and staying on top of our workload. This chart's pretty similar to what Harlan showed a minute ago. Last fiscal year, the number of projects and the fact that our total project cost over the last fiscal year was about $3 billion. And as I mentioned a minute ago, we're tracking about $3 billion. So all of what we did last fiscal year, probably between now and 6 months from now, about the same dollar amount. So it's a lot of work. We've got ways and strategies in place to make it happen, but we're expecting that we're going to see this work continue to saturate our staff definitely into at least April, probably May, in terms of workload. That's the expectation that we're telling clients in our office. So that's all I have. Ron, if you want to take charge.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I think I'm all set. Well, I did not get the memo on a lead-in slide that has all of our supervisors listed for you all, but I'll just give you a brief update. We had our long-standing supervisor for the access unit retire into last year, Don Fenlison. He was replaced by Scott Davison. Scott's been a long time a member of our office. Really smooth transition there. Scott's been really a pleasure to work with. I expect you to have the same experience there. This year, our field supervisor, Nathan Larson, is going to retire. He's been here for close to 30 years. That'll be a big turnover as far as experience, and really a resource for all of us at DSA with Nathan leaving. So we're doing interviews for his replacement. So we'll have somebody in place probably within the next month or thereabout. Our office has been very busy. You've seen the same chart from everybody else. That green line is if you average our workload over a whole year. That horizontal green line is kind of our average. So we've been over this stretch here, I'll circle it. We've received about 9 months of work in 5 months from March and through July. We were very busy, almost double our workload. So the other offices certainly helped carry some of that burden. Did some overtime and also consulted projects out. At DSA, our projects nothing sits. There's no bin time. We go right to plan reviews. So if we can't handle with in-house staff, sharing offices and so forth, we bring in consultants to help with that work. Switching to electronic plan review really makes this a pretty smooth transition when we share work between offices. And then statewide, just kind of comparison, our office, I kind of circled it down here, took in about a third of the workload statewide was based on cost. And so we're hoping that eases off a little bit for our region. Sacramento and Oakland really helped us out this year because they were a little bit slower over the last fiscal year. So it all balanced out pretty well. So that's where we are on our workload. We made a pretty big change in our office. We operated for 20, 30 years under the premise of back checks in person were only on Tuesdays and half days Wednesdays, and over the counter was on Thursday. That's how we operated forever, seems like here. So with every retirement comes an opportunity to rethink how we do things. And so we changed our operation to have back check, in-person back check on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, any of those 3 days. Just a reminder, we're generally all teleworking, most of us, on Monday and Friday, and then we're all in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we're very open for business on those days for over the counter in person. So that really eases up where maybe in the past a client would come in on a Tuesday or a Wednesday to do back check, and they maybe didn't get through all the comments that day. They're stuck and have to come back the following week. Might add a week to their schedule. Now they can come back in a day or two on a Wednesday or Thursday to get their project stamped out. So I think this provides a tremendous amount of better customer service and availability. The second thing we did was change our over the counter to not just be Thursday, but spread it out over Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Also allows more options for the clients. And then not only we changed the schedule for over the counters, we changed how we operate. We used to, when clients would come in for over the counter, they would upload their plans the night before. We'd meet with them over the counter that morning, do the plan review for fire, structural, and access through that morning. Some clients might not get their comments till noon on that over the counter day. So it really put them in a bind in the afternoon to address any comments that were made on the plans that morning to get stamped out by the end of that day. And so what we've done is, instead of uploading the night before, you upload the plans 5 days beforehand. We do the plan review with our plan reviewers before you arrive to the office. And then when the client arrives on their over the counter day, we walk through the comments that morning. That way you're ready to roll with your comments. The design team is that morning, gives them a much higher hit rate or probability of getting stamped out that same day. So we're finding a lot less return visits on our over the counter with that process. This is very much, the over the counter process is very much in alignment with our Sacramento office. We're trying to align these processes amongst all 4 offices. So we're all migrating to this path. And I think Chris Morton will talk more about over the counter process a little bit later. And then lastly, we have a lot of retirements this year in San Diego. I mentioned already, Nathan, we have, I'll skip this slide. We already talked about it. Sorry. I've a couple structural plan reviewers, a couple field engineers, a codes and standards member in my office, all retiring from our structural engineering group. We also have an access and a fire life safety member retiring. So we're going to end up with about 6 structural plan reviewers by when this all dust settles that we're going to have to replace or backfill behind. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. The market's pretty difficult, pretty tough right now, but we're working through that. We're looking at opening up a structural engineering associate position that we haven't had for many years, a civil position to help backfill some of those spots. Anyways, that's it on the office update. I'll hand it over to the next group member here. Any questions? Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so Ryan Turner, I'm going to be going through some document updates. Here's just a preview of the updates we're going to be providing. So I will be, turn on this. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to cover the first few items here, some general updates from a structural safety standpoint, as well as a couple bulletins, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. She's going to cover a few accessibility documents, and then Alicia's going to cover some energy compliance. Ron's going to go through in detail a couple of administrative IRs that are key documents for us, and then Eric's going to wrap up with a bulletin on fire life safety. All right, so I'll start out with this first item is actually a document that we've taken out of circulation. We rescinded this bulletin 0703 that came out in 2007. DSA became aware of some issues with defective seam welds. You can see here there's a seam weld running along the length of a structural tube steel, and we issued this bulletin, provided some recommendations on how to mitigate those defects. And then since then, we've really improved the quality control of a lot of our welds with special inspection requirements, and then also IR 17.3 for structural welding inspection that kind of took care of what we were addressing in that bulletin. We felt we didn't need that bulletin anymore. It's been around for 18 years, and we pulled it down. Also, the form DSA 103 for test and inspection has been coordinated to remove the inspection requirements for those seam welds. The next item here is new IR 19-8. This is for Shotcrete construction, and this was issued back in May. It's a brand new IR that was created to help clarify some of the concrete requirements when concrete's placed using the shotcrete method. So that covers requirements that need to go on the construction documents and plans, as well as some of the pre-construction test panel demonstration items, as well as quality assurance requirements that are specific to shotcrete that need to happen during construction. So Ron already talked a little bit about over-the-counter, and Chris is going to talk some more later, but we did update this policy 702. It hadn't been updated for about 8 years. It was last updated in 2017, so we updated it, came out and was posted in May. A lot of updates throughout the document. One thing that we clarified in here is that the PC approval stamps actually do not need to be crossed out when they're submitted for a site-specific application through over-the-counter. That was a change from past practice. The title of the document also has been shortened to just simplify it and make it more specific. I think it used to say over-the-counter review of PC approved, pre-check approved design projects. We shortened that title up a bit. One of the key things I wanted to point out, though, is this new Appendix A. So we had an over-the-counter package checklist that showed all of the items that were required in addition to the DSA-3, which is the project submittal checklist. And it required the designers to go through and look at all of the items in the policy document, plus the DSA-3, and figure out which ones applied. So we tried to streamline that and take all of the relevant items out of the DSA-3 and pull them into the policy document. So now everything's here in one place and should help to make that a little bit of an easier process. The next item here is a procedure 1301 for construction oversight. This was last published in 2017 as well, and it goes through all of the duties that are expected for various parties during construction for construction oversight. So that would include the project inspectors, architects, engineers, the geotechnical engineer, the lab of record. And this one's still being worked on, but it should be getting wrapped up soon and will be posted in the probably in the next few weeks. Some of the revisions are going to include some significant reformatting. Also, a lot of the language had some repetition, so we tried to consolidate that down to make it easier to follow. There are a lot of pointers that have been added to the CBC code sections rather than regurgitating and repeating that same code language in the procedure. And then also to help clean up or clarify how the project inspection card should be filled out and used. There's been some new examples that have been added to the appendix and based on different types of project scope. And here's just an overview of some of the important forms that we would normally expect during construction that are covered in this document. Another document coming soon that is nearing the end of its update is the DSA-1. This is one that gets used all the time. It's the application for approval of plans and specs. So hadn't been updated for about 5 years. Few things I'll point out here. There's a new line item 5A that is going to be used for PC applications. So that's where you would put the scope item for that on the application. Also line 9 for rehab projects. There's a new place to input the EDCR That's the evaluation and design criteria report application number that would go along with rehab projects. So that wasn't there before. Also, Ron's going to talk a lot about the geohazard reports in IRA4. We've made some changes there, and the DSA1 needed to be updated to clarify a case, add a third case to the checkbox for when a geohazard report is required, but it doesn't have to be submitted to CGS for review and approval. So that wasn't in there before. So this is coordinated to go along with that. And then there's also some instructions that have been cleaned up to cover the project scope items in lines 5 through 10 to clarify the intent. And that's added at the back end of the DSA1. Okay, I talked a little bit about the Form 3, the DSA3, the project submittal checklist. This was revised and posted back in June. And a few things I wanted to point out. We did add a place to put the DSA application number and the date that the form was completed. So that's a new addition to the latest form. There's also some lines added to identify the California climate zone on the drawings to make sure that that doesn't get missed. And then with some of the energy requirements, with PV requirements that came out last cycle, there's a new DSA1, so the alternate means and methods form to check. That's been added to the checklist for whenever they are utilizing that form to satisfy the PV panel requirements. And then also just a lot of various items have been cleaned up and clarified that to update for our current procedures. The next few slides, I'm going to talk about the form DSA 103, which is for structural test and special inspections. So back in April, we switched over and transitioned the platform from Adobe Forms, the AEM, over to Microsoft Power Pages. I was going to refer to it as PP, but that happened back in April. This applies to the 103 version for the 22 edition as well as the 19 edition. At that point, we looked at the 16 edition and decided that it wasn't really being used for new projects enough to justify transitioning that over. So we went ahead and retired the 16 edition. And we're currently working on the 25 CBC edition that will be coming out soon and will be available when the time comes to start submitting projects under the new code. So there were some substantive items that were updated in the 22 edition, but the 19, we really didn't do too much to it other than just convert it over to the new platform. Power Pages does require users to log in with an account, and I'll have a screen where I'll show a little bit what that looks like. And to help answer some of the questions and confusion that may come up with using a whole new platform, there was a new user guide that was posted when this was released back in April. So one of the big things from a content standpoint that was changed, we in the old version of the 103 form, everything was kind of listed together. You had the item that was requiring test and inspection, and all the code sections, references and notes and commentary, that was all included. And it made the form spread out over 15 to 20 pages, and it was hard sometimes to find the items that you were maybe looking for that was most important. So we've gone through and we've pulled out all of the line items, so you can see all the individual items here, and there's a checkbox about whether or not it is required or applies for the project, and then the type of inspection, whether it's periodic, continuous, or a test, and then also who's performing that test, whether it's the geotech lab or a project inspector. So that's all been consolidated down into the first 4 pages of the document, and then the other information, which is still important but isn't as to get like the real quick snapshot of what's happening for your project, that's all been moved over to the back into the appendix. So you can see the same line item, like S1A would apply to soils, S1A for site preparation, and the references and notes. So hopefully that will streamline and make the document a little bit easier to use. Also for the exemption, so there are a lot of items that we've determined are needed on DSA projects, but they're exempt from structural tests and special inspections. We've tried to clean those up. One key thing that changed this in this last edition was whether or not the exemption needed to be identified on the construction documents. And we've gone through, and some of them we felt like they did still need to be identified on the drawings, but other post-installed anchors, if you check the box and under the exemption, we felt like that was enough and you don't need to go through and chase it all the way back to the drawings. It was just causing a lot of extra time and effort to do that. Here's the kind of the interface or the new platform, Power Pages. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this would be the first tab where you click the project information, you fill it out this way, and then you would work your way along each of these items, and then it will eventually generate a PDF that you would use. And at the end of the day, it kind of works similar to before, but it's just using a new platform. All right, so now I'm going to jump into move to the seismic mitigation program. We have this procedure 0803 that has been around. It was created, the first two digits for the procedure or the year that it came out, so 2008. We actually hadn't really updated this document since then. This is in dire need of an update, and it's regarding a funding program that goes back about 20 years. There's a lot of money that was designated for seismic mitigation work on public schools that's managed by the Office of Public School Construction, or OPSC. And OPSC relies on DSA to help determine the eligibility for that funding and also to confirm that the scope is consistent with the seismic mitigation work. Like I said, this was last updated in 2008, so it really needed to be updated for a variety of reasons. One of the big issues was that the procedure still referred to an outdated reference standard. So for rehabs and for the main work, it was ASC 31. That came out in 2003, and it should have been updated to ASC 41 a while ago. So we took care of that. Also, the procedure was out of sync with a lot of our other procedures, in particular, electronic plan review, or EPR. There were a lot of cases where we found that clients would pay attention and follow instructions of the procedure, and they would show up at DSA with paper documents because that's what the procedure said that they were supposed to do. But we don't require that anymore under the EPR process. Also updated the eligibility evaluation report template that goes along with this procedure document, and I'll go over that a little bit more on another slide. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the S&P process, there are basically three application numbers that would occur on a project like this. You got phase one for the eligibility verification. That would get the first application number, its own application number. And then for the second phase, you would get a different application number. And then this is one of two paths. It's really either a replacement assessment report, or it would be a traditional EDCR report, or evaluation and design criteria report. So to help simplify things, we combined those into a common phase two. It used to be split up into two different phases, but that was causing confusion, and it's not really a linear process. So those were simplified to help clarify that process. And then the third phase for project approval is really, that gets another application number, and that's just the regular project itself when they come to submit to actually do the work and design it on and put together on the plans. So like I said, this used to be laid out as a 5-phase process, but it's really only 3 phases, and hopefully this will be easier to follow for new projects. This is a flow chart that's in the procedure that's been expanded to try and reflect the way that we renumbered the phases, and also to give a little bit more information. As you can see here, the replacement analysis report follows this part of the flow chart, and then also the other path would be the evaluation and design criteria reports. That's been updated in the flow chart. So the other thing that we updated along with the procedure is the template that's needed, and that's for the eligibility evaluation report. So that occurs in phase 1, and you can see that's been added to our website, and we wanted to make that document and template more accessible and available for everyone. And it's been reorganized as well. It's a Word document. We've added some notes to the designers that are available as comments. You can see here there's some instructions. When you're using this template, you can keep all of those comments in the Word document. You don't have to delete them, but whenever you go to print out the report, you want to make sure that those get turned off, because the PDF version that gets submitted to DSA for review shouldn't have any of the instructional information. And then there's also, we separated out all the tables. They used to be listed as one really big table, so we've broken them out into separate tables. And then the idea is that any table that doesn't apply, you would essentially delete them from the Word document and from the PDF, and help to make the eligibility report smaller, and hopefully it would speed up the review and make things a lot easier by only focusing on the relevant items. And then there's also a drop-down menu for the status that you can see whether it's conforming, non-conforming, to make that a little bit easier for filling out the report. All right, so now I'm going to switch over and talk a little bit about the process for submitting for the new 25 codes. So we have two bulletins, 2501, which is about using the 22 PCs, extending them out for the next CBC. And then bulletin 2502 is going to cover the effective dates for using the new code. And then also we will allow early project submittals by a month. And I'll talk about that on another slide. And then also the IR PC design criteria, so the pre-check designs. We have a whole set of series of documents that walks through specific criteria items that are expected for those documents. All right, so first for Bulletin 2501, again, this was issued on August 19th. It replaces the equivalent bulletin from 3 years ago, 2201, and it provides notice to all the designers that we will extend the 22 PCs by 1 year. So the new code, the 25 CBC, goes into effect on January 1st of 2026, and we will allow the 22 PCs to be used for 12 months after that, so all the way through December 31st. It's a little bit different than last cycle. We only allowed them for 6 months, so we're extending it an extra 6 months for a few reasons. Also in this Bulletin 2501, there's a new Table 3 that has been added, and this helps to clarify where each office should, or where each PC type should be submitted to each regional office. And the goal really was to balance out the workload so that not one office wasn't doing all the PC reviews, but it also allows some more consistency so that we're not having a solar carport submitted to LA that's reviewed differently than one that's submitted to San Diego. So the idea was to submit them all to the same office and get more consistent enforcement, and then also prevent any competitive advantages from submitting to one office versus another. So you can see the breakdown for each of the different PC types. I'm not going to go through them all. These are the PC types and then the office where they would be submitted. There are a couple different ones for modular buildings and relocatable buildings where we couldn't practically get them to all be submitted to the same office, but for the most part, those are all going to be submitted to the same offices that they have been in the past based on the geographic locations. But because of the possibility of submitting to another part of the state, DSA will be more flexible on remote in-person back checks to avoid long travel times to go in person for back checks. Okay, so the next bulletin, 2502, also issued on August 19th, that announces the 25 California Code effective dates. So I mentioned that the 25 CBC will go into effect, or all the 25 codes will go into effect on January 1st, 2026, except for the admin code. So part 1, the California Administrative Code, actually went into effect on April 6th. And on the next slide, this is where I mentioned that so we've done this the past few cycles where we would allow on a voluntary basis, if a client wants to use the new codes a little bit early, we would accept them 1 month early on December 1st of 2025. And if it's an access only project, there's some other things that go along with that. So we will start accepting those even earlier. So we would already accept those now since September 1st. All right. And then the IRPC design criteria. So those are all being updated from the 22 to the 25 CBC. You can see we got PC1 all the way down to 7. One thing I'll point out here is that PC5 for precast concrete buildings, we noticed that we didn't get a single submittal for those for the 22 CBC. So we decided to just skip updating that for the 25 code. But if somebody did submit a project, they could still use the 22 CBC version of that document. But we decided not to update the PC design criteria for the new code. And these are all very close to completion, and we expect to be posting them fairly soon. So some of the things that have changed, I'm not going to go through. There's obviously a lot of things that had to be updated, but some of the key things in the PC design criteria are we have a new version of ASC 7. So it switched from the 16 edition to the 22 edition. That's probably the most important reference standard that we use from a structural standpoint. Also the seismic provisions, seismic design manual, the AISC 341 is updating from the 16 to the 22 edition. Also some things with the geohazard report that I mentioned before that Ron's going to talk about with IRA4. We tried to coordinate that and clarify the expectations for when geohazard reports need to go to CGS. One of the big things that is going to affect PC projects is a change that happened in ASC 722, specifically like for solar carports. We've typically accepted those as ordinary cantilever column systems, but ASC 722 had a change where they no longer permit those in Chapter 12 for seismic design categories D, E, or F. So that means any solar carport that has an occupancy under it that is governed by Chapter 12, it's now going to have to be designed instead of an ordinary cantilever column system as a special cantilever column system. And that's going to have some extra detailing requirements that give it the special ductility and ability to have the higher seismic values. There are some unoccupied structures that can still be designed. It was a non-building structure per Chapter 15, and that also includes ground-mounted PV systems that we've added that as a new section to IRPC 7 for the solar carports. So those can be designed using Chapter 12 or 15. There's also some changes that are going to be happening with the drilled pier foundation elements with embedded poles. We've had this bulletin 0906 that's been around since 2009. It was last updated 15 years ago. We're in the process of taking the relevant information out of that and relocating it to another IR 18.5 that's part of our foundation series, and we will be rescinding or retiring this bulletin. It can still be used for unoccupied non-building structures that are designed per Chapter 15 as far as the embedded pole aspect, but there are some other restrictions that are going to kick in for this. And as I mentioned before, the administrative code went into effect on April 6th. So that's actually been effective for a little more than 5 months now. As a result of that, we needed to update all of our existing building IR documents. So we have 6 IREB existing building documents that have been available for a few years now. So we've updated all of them for the new 25 admin code, except for IREB4. And that one was actually updated earlier this year to pick up the annual replacement value construction cost numbers that were published by OPSC. All right, so that concludes my portion. I'm going to hand it now over to Michelle Davis, and she's going to talk about accessibility.
Thank you, Ryan. I did not have a bunch of slides to go with my presentation. I'm going to talk about 3 documents that have already been updated. The first is the Form 1 RUH, which is a request for unreasonable hardship. And this is submitted when a project, for whatever reason, cannot fully comply with the path of travel requirements in Chapter 11B of the building code. So it's for alterations, modifications, etc. And we have reorganized. We undertook quite a significant review of the 1 RUH form in the calendar year 2024. And the revised version was published last September. And it's still an 8-page form, but hopefully it is much clearer and more easily understood by the design teams so that they can reasonably fill out what the information is that's needed in order to either approve an unreasonable hardship or not, depending on what the case may be. It is an 8-page form, but it's 8 pages because we've given the design teams a lot of space to make their case. So half of the form is space for providing information. One of the big changes to the form was that page 2 now requires a district representative's signature as well as the architect of record. This is to make sure that the district understands and knows what is happening with their project as well as the design team. We do not want the 1 RUH form placed on construction documents. And this is because it has estimates, cost estimates, or perhaps actual costs, depending on the situation. And because the cost information is somewhat and I've lost the word. Anyway, you don't need those on the drawings. The description of what will and will not be improved as part of path of travel will go on the drawings, but the 1 RUH form itself will not. I do want to point out that there is a large section for equivalent facilitation on page 7 of the form. And one of the requirements for finding unreasonable hardship is that there needs to be a description of what the project is going to do instead of the required path of travel improvements. So that is a required section of the form. I encourage you to download the new form and use it. The next new form is Bulletin 2403. 2403 is the form that describes the limits for green schoolyards projects. So Education Code 17672 limits path of travel improvements for green schoolyards projects to 20%. However, there are some limitations on what a green schoolyards project is. For example, it cannot have any sort of new buildings, no modernizations of buildings. It's really a project to remove concrete and asphalt and make the schoolyards a greener place, reduce urban heat island effects, that sort of thing. And when those projects are doing that kind of work, we can limit the path of travel requirements to 20% of the adjusted construction cost. I do want to point out, because we've gotten questions, that the green schoolyards projects are not limited to those projects receiving the CAL FIRE grants. It can be a completely self-funded district greening project that doesn't have any CAL FIRE connection whatsoever. It still may be eligible. And the DSA 450 is the companion form that goes with the Bulletin 2403. The 450 does become part of the project record, and it is a declaration and a certification by both the design team and the district representative. Again, we want both signatures. And that says that the project does meet the requirements and is eligible for the path of travel exception. And I didn't mention the PR 2404, which I should have. I apologize. PR 2404 is the procedure for requesting the unreasonable hardship. That's the first one I was talking about at the beginning. So you have instructions on how to fill out the form in PR 2404, and then the form itself is the DSA 1 RUH. And I see a question.
Thanks, Michelle. Hey, just quick question. Is there any language in the BU 2403? I know that Devin and I both are in the arena of doing some separate site work projects. And no offense to Buddy or the other architects, but this is really right up our wheelhouse in terms of site improvements. Are we still required to have an architect as the professional in responsible charge on these type of projects?
I don't think we changed anything along those lines. I would have to defer to others on that, but I think it was the bulletin itself just clarified what projects are eligible.
Okay.
And I think that's all I have, so I can pass the microphone on to the next person.
Michelle, you had some coming soon documents.
We do actually. Oh, that's right. Thank you. Yes. For all of the accessibility interpretation of regulations, the IR documents, especially 9, 10, those documents that have not been looked at for a number of years, we are in the process of revising and reviewing them and making changes to update those documents as well. So they will be coming hopefully within the next few months. So watch out for those.
You're muted, Alicia.
Hello, everyone. I'll be reviewing the DSA 403 series. The Sustainability Unit has been updating the DSA 403 checklist series, starting with the DSA 403C, which is for the Cal Green mandatory measures. It was published late last year and is required on every project submittal. Moving on to the DSA 403 is for energy code compliance and is the product of merging the old 403A and 403B, which were separate forms covering the prescriptive and performance methods. So we hope that should make things a little easier for clients. And that was published in July of this year and is required with all site-specific projects. Finally, the DSA 403 PC, which was published yesterday. It will replace the DSA 403 PRE and the DSA 403 PR, the separate performance and prescriptive form methods were combined. And let's see here. Yeah, so those two were combined. Those checklists are combined into one, and it was required for all pre-check building designs. This particular 403 PC will go into effect on December 1st of this year. Now I'll move on to the next procedure, which we also updated. The PR 1802 was published in mid-September and has undergone major updates, it is recommended that districts and their architects as well as modular manufacturers review this updated document to become familiar with the policies stated within. Some areas of note are the revisions to PC designs after approval, construction, relocation, and/or alterations to relocatable buildings. There will be a DSA CGE verification that'll be happening in the near future. Also stockpile site-specific and relocation climate zone limitations. Those are something you might want to take a look at, and limitations on applications to relocatable PCs. And that is more to do with the climate zone that they might be in. And that will be going into effect on December 1st of 2025 as well. Just as a note, I want to go back and point out something on the DSA 403 series, the the 403 PC, the AMBs will be, actually the PRE and the PER will be remaining on the DSA website until December 1st, and then they will be removed and archived. So they still will be available up until December 1st. So I will be passing this on to the next presenter.
Thanks, Alicia. I have a few slides to go through IRA 4 about geohazard reports, and then we'll get on to IRA 22, brief update on both those. So IRA 4 is a document that basically describes when a geohazard report's required on a project. We updated this document, and we're not changing when a geohazard report's required, but rather clarifying and changing which of those reports are required to go to CGS. And so I'm going to run through that with you. Since not all reports need to go to CGS, and after I go through this, you might find that one of your design teams or yourself is unsure whether or not a report has to go to CGS or not. We've identified a contact person in each office. You can see them here on the bottom of the slide. And we've set that up purposely so you have a person to reach out to in each of our offices. So we have a point of contact and funnel all those questions to those 4 people. So if you're unsure, contact the person in that regional office your project's in, and then they'll help navigate whether or not you need to submit it to CGS prior to submitting your project to DSA. And that's important because the last thing you want is to make a determination you don't need to submit your geohazard report to CGS. And then you come to submit your regular project to DSA, and DSA says, did you submit it to CGS? And you're like, no, we don't need to per this IR, and maybe you misinterpreted or maybe we're unclear. And now might be a little bit behind because sometimes the CGS review can take longer than our project. This depends on the size and complexity of it, of course. This will help avoid that by having that contact. So we made this change a little earlier this year in May. And so, look, when a geohazard report's required is not changing. It's just we're decreasing the number of reports that go to CGS. This stems from about a year ago or so. We had a few projects where we were getting ready to approve the project at DSA, but the geohazard report hadn't been approved yet through CGS. And so we met with CGS. I know Jennifer's on the call here today as well. We met with her and her team and strategized what can we do to either provide more clarity to the clients on what the status of their report is, and secondly do we really need all the reports to go to CGS? And so this is the outcome of those discussions. So we'll point out that if you go to the CGS website, I didn't do a screenshot of it here, but they've implemented, Jennifer and her team's implemented kind of a portal or a part of the website where you can go view the status of the CGS review on DSA projects. So you can go in and enter your project number, and I'll tell you where it is in the process. So that's a nice tool that'll help you navigate the status of your CGS review at any time. And then what we did on IRA 4 is we clarified that, I'll just broadly speaking, is only those sites that have some sort of geotechnical or geologic issue on them are the sites that you're going to be submitting the report to CGS. That's broad, but I'll get into more detail in the next slide. So I put this flow chart together to help the clients navigate what's in IRA 4. Look, a geohazard report is required really under 3 main conditions. One is you have a new school site or a new building, or you're rehabilitating an existing building. That's the fundamentals of when a geohazard report is required. There's a few exemptions to that. If it's a non-building structure that you're building, I don't know, a ball wall, a pole, things like that, those are non-building structures. They don't shelter a use or occupancy. The other is if it's a small building under 4,000 square foot, steel or wood, those can be exempt if they're under 4,000 square feet. This typically applies to your small enclosed buildings or carports, shade structures, and so forth. But in order to meet that exemption, you cannot have any geologic hazards at the site. So that's the test for if you need to do a geohazard report at all. If you don't need one, you're done. If you do need to do one, then you'll put that report together. It'll certainly go to DSA, but the question is, does it also need to go to CGS prior to submitting your project to DSA? And so the test for whether or not you need to go to CGS are outlined here. And essentially what they are is they're all items that have to deal with, first of all, if it's a new school site, it's going to CGS no matter what. But if it's an existing school site, then you need to ask yourself, is the building on deep foundations? Do we need to do soil improvements, whether it's grout injection or stone columns or all these other ground improvement options? Do you need to do a geohazard? There's various ground motion studies that need to be done on some sites. That would need to go to CGS. If you're on a poor soil site like Class E or F, and these are soft soil sites, they tend to amplify the seismic load at the site. It's really important to get that nailed down correctly. And then the other is if you have a geologic hazard at the site, which is faulting, liquefaction, slope stability. If those are mapped, you certainly go to CGS. If your geohazard, if it's not mapped, because not all the sites in the state are mapped, but your geologic hazard or geohazard report does indicate you have a geologic hazard, in either of those cases, it would go to CGS. You might also find that you have a lot of differential settlement in the site because there's loose sands. And so that's this last one. So really, if you have some sort of geological issue on the site, those would go to CGS. If not, then you just submit it to DSA with your project. The IR goes into more detail, but that's broadly speaking the change that's been made. I don't think we have the time to go through all these examples I put together. You can read most of them on your own, but I'll go through the first one because this is a departure of maybe what you would have been used to prior to this change. So let's say you're on, these are all examples for an existing site, right? Because if it's a new site, it goes no matter what to CGS. So let's say you have a new 2-story building, fairly large, 40,000 square foot classroom building. It's on spread footings, so it's not in deep foundations. There's no geohazards at the site, right? Liquefaction, faulting, slope stability issues, and there's no significant soil settlement, and you're on a pretty good soil type D, soil class D. So you have so you definitely have to do a geohazard report because it's over 4,000 square feet. Does it need to go to CGS? No, because you're not in deep foundations, there's no soil issues at the site and so forth. So I kind of give you an example. In the past, that would have gone to CGS, certainly. The other examples, I'll let you read on your own. If you certainly have questions, reach out to the people on that first slide that I mentioned to you. Any questions on IRA 4 before I go on to IRA 22?
I have one, Ron.
Oh, yes.
Just assuming you, in your graphic on the previous slide, you used the word rehabilitation specifically for existing projects below the 50% replacement value threshold. I'm assuming that no geohazard to CGS.
Yeah, Laura, so you're saying if you're altering a school building and you were not triggering a rehab because you were below the 50%
Yes.
replacement cost, yeah, then there would no geohazard report would be required.
Yeah, okay,
Um,
just confirming.
Generally speaking, it wouldn't, unless you were going in and sometimes people do voluntary seismic strengthening and you might have deep foundations as part of that, then you might be going down that path. But your typical whole site mod where the costs are getting up in the 40–45%, but you're staying below the trigger, no, it would not require a geohazard report. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, IRA 22. IRA 22 is evolved over the last, I don't know, 10 years or thereabout. It used to have, this IR describes when your project is exempt from DSA or a part of it being exempt from DSA. And we had an appendix table in the back and we kept adding things to the table over time. And it kept growing and growing and getting more and more complicated. And so it was really time to hit reset and redo this IR. And that's what we did earlier this year. And before I get into those changes, I just want to point out a few things. Is that this can be complicated and very messy, and little details matter, right? Some things you might think that are exempt, but because of certain circumstances, it's not exempt. If you're ever unsure, reach out to the regional manager in each of your offices that you're submitting to and ask the question. Look, some school boards want DSA concurrence that a project's exempt. I encourage you to take that path and not think a project's exempt and then find out that it should have been submitted and now we're trying to unwind things and get things submitted after the fact, or dealing with them later on down the road when you have some work that's not certified on a site. But we have a procedure 1402 that gives you a process for getting exempt concurrence. You fill out a form and a small fee, or you give us schematic plans of what you believe is exempt, and then we'll review it and send you a letter. Yes, this is exempt. Then you can bring that to the school board, say DSA concurred this project's exempt. So let's get into the IRA 22. Broadly speaking, there's only 3 times a project's exempt from DSA. It's either maintenance work, or you're altering a school building and it's under the cost threshold of $130,000. And I'll emphasize altering a school building. If you're doing a site changes, I don't know, adding playground equipment or adding some other structures on a site, that doesn't fall under that exemption. It's only altering a school building. And then lastly is the scope is not defined as a school building. It could be not defined somewhere in the ed code. It could be not defined in the administrative code somewhere. It's not defined as a school building. This gets messy because the statutes that address DSA, structural, fire, and access review all come from different parts of the statutes and our building codes. And so what might be exempt for one discipline may not be exempt for another. So again, broadly, maintenance and altering the school buildings, the first 2 are exempt from all disciplines. When we get to what's not defined as a school building, that's where different disciplines start to play into it. And so many a times, something that's not defined as a school building is exempt for structural and fire, but it's not for access. For example, say you're putting a greenhouse on a school campus. There's some exemptions in the admin code for those. Access is required, review is required. So it gets messy. The other thing that gets messy with all this is what regulations apply. The first 2, it's still required to comply with the Field Act, right? You're still required and obligated to do inspections, just you're not submitting it for DSA approval. The one on the far right, the not defined as a school building, that if you're in that camp, it doesn't need to comply with the Field Act or the DSA adopted provisions in the code. It can comply with the Building Standards Commission provisions in the code. So these things get very messy. And so IRA 22 kind of dumped all of this into one appendix table, which I'll show you in a second. So just a quick high level of those 3 things. Maintenance, here's the definitions of maintenance. I'm not going to go through them in detail. This is the one from the admin code, and the one below is from 11B202 for accessibility. This is painting, carpet and kind replacement, a failed piece of mechanical equipment or certain size, those sort of things. It's very minor work. Re-roofing. in kind. And then the second I mentioned was the cost threshold. I emphasized the $130,000 because there's essentially no restrictions or strings attached to that as far as what type of scope you're touching. But there's a second cost threshold that you're probably familiar with that's in the same section of the administrative code and the ed code, and that's a higher cost threshold, which is $293,000. That threshold has a lot of restrictions or strings attached, if you will. You can't have structural work. You can't have accessibility work. It's got a lot of constraints to it, and it's very difficult to find a project that meets that. So if you think you have a project that meets that higher cost threshold, again, I would reach out to your regional office and have a discussion with them about it. And then the last thing I mentioned is things that are not defined as a school building. I touched on that already. So this is from the admin code. There's things in there that are exempt from DSA review. Poles less than 35 feet high, fences under certain height, greenhouses, those kind of structures. As I said, as I started out, IRA 22 evolved, and all of this content's been dumped into one appendix, and it can be very confusing. There was 35 plus footnotes, and it was just convoluted, and it was really easy to mess things up, if you will, as you went through the table. So what we did in January, because every January we have to update this IR because those cost thresholds get escalated with the current construction index. And when we did that, we also separated the appendix into two different appendix. One that addressed all the maintenance items and one that dealt with all the what's not defined as a school building. It still wasn't very good. We still had a lot of things in Appendix A that were other stuff in there that was buried in there that really needed to get pulled out, but we need to get this updated for the cost indexes. So we rolled out a version in February that had these two appendix tables. And then a few months later, we rolled out the version as it stands today. And that was in April. And so we created 3 different appendix tables to align with these different buckets, if you will, of types of projects. I think will make it easier for people to understand why they're in that table and help you navigate and through whether your project is exempt or not. So I'll just go from left to right. So anything that's to do with the maintenance is dumped in Appendix B. Obviously, we don't need an appendix for the cost threshold. And then everything has to do with what's not defined as a school building falls in Appendix A. And as I mentioned before, you'll see many of the projects that are in Appendix A do require submittal to DSA for at least access compliance. And then the far right-hand one, you'll see Appendix C. There was content that didn't really fit in any of these 3 buckets. And I'll give you an example. It's like a fire alarm only job. Only needs to be submitted to DSA for fire life safety. And so those type of things we put in Appendix C. And I mentioned before, all of these have to comply with the Field Act and the DSA adopted provisions, except for those that fall outside the definition of a school building, those that are in Appendix A. Those you need to comply with what the model code provisions are. And so that's kind of in a nutshell what the breakdown is. I think this is easier to explain to school districts. It might be easier to explain to your school board with it broke out like this. So with that, I think that wraps up what I wanted to get through before I hand it over to Eric for the next bulletin. Any questions on IRA 22? I hope you find this useful. We put a lot of work into it. By the way, there's no footnotes anymore. They're all eliminated. We've added a notes column. We've also added a better description in the body of the IR to describe these things. Maybe everybody's ready for a break soon. Okay. Eric, you take it over. You're muted, Eric.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I presume everybody probably is ready for a break. So my update is relatively short, and I would say that Greg mentioned that he is soon to be our principal fire life safety officer. So I'll take the opportunity to congratulate him on his successful interviews. We are very excited at headquarters to be able to steal him from the Sacramento office. He's a longtime fire life safety officer too with Sacramento office, and we look forward to him joining headquarters in his new role. And normally in subsequent PSCCs, he will do these fire life safety updates for you. But he has not yet started yet, so he's giving me some time today, so I appreciate that. But BU 2405 is a new bulletin relatively new, related to the fire safety, the fire safety plan that's required to be submitted to DSA. That submittal coincides with the initial submission of the DSA 102 IC. The site safety plan is required by the CBC in Chapter 3302, specifically 3302.3, but the details of those requirements are actually in the CFC. So it's a reference from the CBC over to the CFC. And there's 13 elements that are required in the site safety plan. I'll note that the CBC actually requires that submission with the permit application. And we recognize that much of this information is not known to the architects at the time of submission to DSA for plan approval. So we have deferred the submission of that, as I mentioned, to coincide with the DSA 102 IC. The district has the primary responsibility of creation of that site safety plan, primarily, again, because much of that information is controlled by the district and or by the contractor. However, the architect, design professionals certainly will play a part in the creation of a site plan, perhaps. That's certainly between you and your clients, but some of the information that's required on that is the name and contact of the site safety director during construction. So that might be the contractor, or it could also be a district representative, a hot work plan, locations of flammable and combustible materials, locations of the site access for fire safety vehicles, things of that nature. So there are 13 items that are required in that site safety plan. And again, lastly, I'll just say that it needs to be submitted with the DSA 102 IC. As I mentioned, that's pretty short and brief. And that is my update on the 2405.
Thank you, Eric. With that, it's time for a break. So if we can be back at 10:45, does that sound good for everyone?
Yes.
All right, see you guys soon. Thank you, everyone. Hope you had a good break. Welcome back. Next up on the agenda, we have legislative updates, which Eric will provide. We'll do a code development update, new initiatives, and then we'll get into the discussion portion of the meeting. So with that, Eric, take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. So the only legislative update that I have for you is related to Assembly Bill 130, which doesn't necessarily directly affect most on this call. However, it certainly affects the work we do at headquarters quite a bit, and we've been pretty active in trying to complete our understanding of the bill. There are two primary, the AB 130 was a trailer bill that language from AB 306 was amended to shortly before it was signed, June 30th of this year. And the trailer bill is primarily residential in nature, but it's a very large trailer bill with a lot in it. And so if you were to just look up the bill, you're going to have to weed through quite a bit of information, some of it funding related to residences, residential units, etc. The part that affects DSA ultimately will affect the users of the code is there are two primary sections that relate to state agency proposals and amendments to the building standards codes. We are currently in the intervening cycle, so I've got that language from the bill in front of you on the slide. The intervening cycle has always, I guess, the unwritten rule was that it was primarily for clarifications, although I think in more recent history, the intervening cycle has materially been much larger. Certainly has been for sustainability, for fire life safety, and at times for access as well. The bill, AB 130, limits the types, now formally limits the types of amendments to Title 24 that can be made during the intervening cycle to mostly just clarifications and conformance issues. There are some carve-outs that you'll see there. For instance, the Wildland Urban Interface Code that was recently adopted by the State Fire Marshal, that's able to be advanced. Emergency building standards, of course, those have always been allowed. But you see there in item A limits the changes to adopted during the intervening code cycle to clarifying, conforming, and coordinating changes that do not materially alter the substance or intent of the existing code provisions. And then item D, jump down to the bottom, there is also a carve out for minimum federal accessibility laws, standards, and regulations. So certainly if the proposals that we're advancing for access are to align with federal laws, then we're able to advance those during the intervening cycle. What's not on the slide is the language controlling the triennial adoption. And so the triennial adoption period can continue in terms of the model code and necessary state amendments to incorporate the model codes every 3 years. However, there is a significant moratorium through 2031 on any regulations that affect residential units. And it's very broadly written. And so I don't have the language up on screen, primarily because we're still trying to determine from legal, as is Building Standards Commission, what the full impact of the language in the law truly means. Certainly many regulations touch residential units. It's not simply part 2.5. That's clearly not the intent, but the regulations that are proposed that might affect residential units even extend into, of course, access, right? Energy code. It does not provide specific carve-outs for energy or access other than to meet minimum federal accessibility laws. So It's a pretty significant bill for DSA and other proposing state agencies for Title 24. What it means for practitioners is that you can look forward to very few changes that affect residential units until 2032, which is when the moratorium ends. So that's my update on AB 130.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any questions on AB 130? All right, moving on to code development updates. Michelle, you're up next.
Sorry, missed where the unmute button was. I have actually just a very fast announcement. Our accessibility code development public meeting is tomorrow. It is an online meeting, and there is a link available on the DSA homepage under the events section. We will be reviewing all of our proposals in this meeting and accepting public comment. It is simply the first public meeting of several where the public's invited to comment, and the proposals, agenda, and information are available on our webpage. I see Andrew has the links and whatnot on your screen there, and I invite you all to join us tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Michelle, did you want to provide an overview of the main bulk of what our rulemaking covers, which is for those who are doing housing it may affect in the future?
We could do that, yeah. The major goal of this cycle is to align with HUD's deeming notice, and this requires projects, not just projects, but entities that receive public funds to also follow HUD's adopted standards, which is UFAS, not the ADAS. So what the deeming notice says is that designers can use the ADAS as long as they do not apply the certain more restrictive standards in UFAS that HUD identifies in the notice. So what we are doing is providing a code path in the CBC for designers and code users to understand whether or not their project is being done by an entity that receives public funds. We have a new definition that covers such things, and then the rest of the requirements are to align those housing projects with the more restrictive UFAS requirements.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Just to add a little bit for community colleges or K-12s who are doing workforce housing, because we do regulations for public housing, there was a recent case that clarified the application of Section 504 regulations. And so that clarity has required us to fulfill our statutory mandate to meet minimum federal. So the changes aren't any or really significant, but they are needed and necessary in order to maintain compliance with federal law. And they affect housing. Yes. Thank you, Michelle. I think it goes to Alicia now.
The Sustainability Unit has participated in a number of pre-cycle activities.
Alicia, your mic is significantly muted.
Sorry, my wand wasn't down. Starting over on this. The Sustainability Unit has participated in a number of pre-cycle activities, some of which were co-hosted with the California Building Standards Commission. Once our most recent public meeting was for our own DSA CalGreen stakeholder meeting, where we presented our code proposals for this 2025 intervening rulemaking cycle. It was an opportunity also to hear from our stakeholders, public schools and community colleges. This month brings us to the end of our pre-cycle activity, and it brings it to a close, and we'll be moving on to finalizing our proposals and preparing our documentation for submission of our 399, the Economic and Fiscal Impact Statement form, in October. And early next year, we will be attending the Code Advisory Committee meeting, where we will be presenting our code proposals as well. And we certainly do invite all our stakeholders, public school districts, architects, and their consultants to join us in that meeting. It'll be, I believe, in February. Some items of note for this code cycle are listed here, and if approved, next year would go into effect on July 1st of 2027 as part of the 2025 California Building Code Supplement. I'm not sure who's next.
And next up, we have Diane Gold and Ryan Turner with structural safety updates.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. So I wanted to just take a moment to go over briefly the timeline for this intervening code adoption cycle. Michelle and Alicia both mentioned we're in the pre-cycle right now, so that's the timeline before we actually submit our proposals to the Building Standards Commission and start the cycle. We have these workshops and public meetings. As you can see, that started in January and concluding this month. That's going to gear up to early December is our deadline to submit to BSC and start the process. And you can see where I don't know how to do the little, let's do the red. I don't know how to do the spotlight thing, but there's the orange asterisk indicates potential opportunities for public comment. So we have the Code Advisory Committee meetings going in spring of next year. There will be the public review process. So that's the 45-day and the 15-day comment periods if necessary. And that all culminates in the commission meeting, which should be held in July and August of next year, which would lead to the adoption of the proposals and filing with the Secretary of State. That leads us into the publication period, which is all the dirty work of the proofing to make sure everything gets printed correctly. Statute requires that it be published by January of 2027, and then there's a 180-day period between the publication and when it can actually go into effect. The effective date for these intervening code supplements will be July of 2027. The one exception to that is our Part 1. The administrative code actually goes into effect 30 days after filing with the Secretary of State. So that will, depending on when the commission meeting, if it's in July or August, that covers Part 1. The Part 1 will become effective in August or September of 2026. With regards to the admin code and structural safety provisions, we also have a public stakeholder meeting that will be held on October 2nd at 10 a.m. That's going to be a virtual meeting using MS Teams. The link and agenda are available on our structural safety code development webpage as linked there. And with regards to what's included, as Eric mentioned in his review of AB 130, we are very limited in what we can include in the intervening code cycles. With regards to Part 1, we have some language catching up with the fee update, I should say the fee reduction that Ida mentioned earlier that we have implemented effective September 1st, a reduction in our structural and access review fees. So that's just getting our admin code language up to date with what we have implemented. We also have, as a result of Proposition 2 or AB 247, there's a requirement that any schools, in order to be eligible to receive state funding for new construction or modernization projects, there's a number of requirements, including they have to submit a 5-year master plan. As part of that, we have implemented a plan for a unique building identifier, because there has to be a building inventory of all their buildings. We are writing into the administrative code when it talks about the requirements for what needs to be included in the submittal. We're including provisions for information there that's going to give us the ability to have a unique building identifier for all our buildings. So that's going to be quite helpful, because right now we have our project numbers, application numbers, which could be one building, it could be many buildings. So it will be very helpful going forward on a number of levels to implement this unique building identifier. Another proposal for our administrative code is with regards to some updates in our project inspector exam format. We are moving to reformat the exam to utilize ICC inspector certifications as prerequisites. So that leaves us with reducing the amount of our DSA administered exam sections. It's currently 7 different sections that we maintain and administer, limiting those to just 3 sections. So we need to update our administrative code language with regards to that. And then when it comes to both Part 2, our California Building Code, and Part 10, the California Existing Building Code, as I mentioned, we're limited to only clarifying or editorial revisions. Anything there does not reflect a material change in approach. And I can pass it to, unless there's any questions, I'm happy to pass it to the next presenter.
Thank you, Diane. Doesn't look like there's any questions. Next, we're on to new initiatives in the Sustainable Schools program. And it looks like Eric and Alicia are presenting there.
Take control and advance the slides, unless Eric, you want to do that?
Sorry, I just took control. Thanks, Alicia. So the Sustainable Schools program is somewhat of a new initiative. It's actually been in the making for some time. A recent budget change proposal that was accepted in this year's budget and ongoing provided 5 new staff that will be reporting to Alicia under the sustainability unit. The 5 new staff will be 1 mechanical engineer and 1 regional sustainability architect that will be assigned in each of the regional offices, 1 per office. Those will all, again, be reporting to Alicia. Sorry, just realized I wasn't on camera. And they will have a varied set of responsibilities, one of which is extending education and outreach and assistance to local districts to allow them to advance any of their sustainability master plans, have their projects be more compliant, answer questions, be available for pre-application meetings, etc. They will have the responsibility of maintaining those relationships with districts within their region and being available to answer questions. They are also going to be doing more, DSA currently reviews PC applications for CalGreen and Energy Review, and so those sustainability architects are going to be receiving training and will be utilizing a standardized checklist to review those projects within their region. And again, those are primarily for PC applications. It was mentioned earlier by Alicia that there will be verification for any site-specific projects that are using PCs, that there will be a verification that no unapproved changes have occurred. So they won't be doing a full review of those site-specific applications, but they will be at least confirming that the PC itself hasn't changed in ways that were not originally approved for CalGreen and Energy. So they will be assisting with that. And then lastly, as you see, there was a mention, I think, in the previous slide about Prop 2 by Diane. There is in Prop 2 an energy efficiency add-on grant. DSA has been assisting OPSC with the development of that grant criteria, and has expanded requirements that include some of the CHIPS requirements. If you've been following along with CHIPS, you know that USUBC has acquired CHIPS and will be incorporating those requirements in the lead system, but we will be maintaining the current abbreviated checklist, CHIPS checklist, so that we can use it to verify compliance of those grants. Those staff that the regional sustainability architects will be assigned to verify those grants, those grant applications within their region. That's a broad overview of the program, but we will be conducting hiring between now and the end of the year, and look to have those sustainability architects in their offices, in the regional office by early 2026.
And I'll pitch in on the next two bullets. The Sustainable School Showcase. The Sustainability Unit will be ushering the return of the Sustainable School Showcase, and we're putting a call out to districts and their design team to put forward projects that are exemplary sustainable projects that we can feature. Send me an email at alicia.chavez@dgs.ca.gov or to DSA sustainability@dgs.ca.gov. And as pardon me, as Eric already mentioned, the OPSC Prop 2 DSA, as he said, is assisting OPSC with review of energy efficiency grant submissions once the projects have been approved by DSA. The Sustainability Unit and its team members, new and old, will be reporting via letter on eTracker the OPSC CHIPS scorecard. This is a new incarnation. It's a reduced version of the CHIPS scorecard for OPSC's purposes, and or the percentage above energy compliance to OPSC and the district. And I think I could pass it on to, let's see. I'm not sure who will be taking it from here.
Chris Morton will be next.
Great.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Eric.
You.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Alicia. Everyone, we've touched on this a little bit previously. Both Ron LaPlante and Ryan Turner mentioned the over-the-counter updates. PLL 702 is an important document that hadn't been updated in a while. That's been picked up. And Ron touched on some of it, that really the focus of it had been general logistics relating to over-the-counter appointments. There had been some small, subtle differences amongst all 4 offices in registration, fee payment, document upload, appointment timing, and things like that. So we've worked to pull all 4 offices into this consistency of approach with the timing for the document updates. I'm sorry, the timing for the document submittals, the appointment, the review ahead of the appointment, and really trying to get a focus that the appointment is going over the comments to try to work to get the approval within this 2-hour appointment. That's really the goal of the over-the-counter appointment. Small pre-check type of projects that can be approved that same day in there, or if it does need to come back for a back check, then quick turnaround to get that approval shortly thereafter. So the document itself has added some clarifications to the scoping of eligible projects for over-the-counter. Sometimes there are multiple PCs that are included in it. Sometimes there are PCs that have more complexity to them, or fire sprinkler systems included in those. So the document gets further into what are the ground rules and how to treat some of those items, whether they're eligible for OTC appointments or not. Moving forward to the next slide, I've provided some of the contact information for scheduling those appointments at each of the regional offices. And then the registration and submittal requirements to follow for this. Even if it being an over-the-counter, we still want to see a registration coming in for this. And then it gets into the specifics for the timing for the document submittal ahead of the appointment, the full fee submittal ahead of the appointment, and then the actual appointment itself. Any questions? Okay. Next will be Andrew, I think, who's the presenter for the PRA updates?
It will be Ron LaPlante next. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Let's give you guys an update on Public Record Act request, or if you're requesting documents from DSA. And maybe to set the stage, about a year ago, or prior to a year ago, anybody from the public essentially could come in and ask for drawings for school buildings. And recognizing that being a security threat and so forth, we worked with school districts and legislation and so forth to get that restricted so that only people that can request drawings are the school districts themselves. Other documents can certainly be requested through a PRA, but the drawings themselves, we only release to school districts. And so that rolled out about a year ago. And then this year, a little earlier this year, we started a transition that's nearly complete. And that is, we're transitioning all of our processing of PRAs and document requests from each regional office to our headquarters unit to really consolidate those services in one location. And really what it does is it really helps reduce our cost, because we were shipping, say you needed a set of plans and files for an old school building and you don't have them in your archives, and we did in our state record center in Sacramento, you would submit a PRA request to the regional office for where that project resides. Then we would do a request to pull those drawings from the state record center building in Sacramento. They would get bundled up and shipped to the regional office. And then we would process them here, scan them, and then provide you the documents you requested. That's a tremendous cost to ship sometimes giant wardrobe sizes of drawing files and countless banker boxes of files. So now, by consolidating the service to headquarters, the state record center is, rather than shipping, they just get transferred and driven over to our headquarters office. There's no shipping costs associated with that, essentially. So they get delivered to our headquarters office. They scan them. We've consolidated our scanners to headquarters. And so now that's all being processed, centralized in one place. And so that's been going on. There's some of our offices are at different phases in that transition, but for the most part, all of our PRA document requests are going through our headquarters unit. So I just want you to be aware of that. If you, as I touched on before, is if you're requesting documents, drawings, there's an authorization form you need to fill out on our website. The school districts do. There's a link to do that on our website. If you go to, there's actually a PRA tab now on our website. So you can click that and then make sure you have the school district has the proper person listed to request that. And then there's another link for filling out a form on what you're requesting, which documents with school, etc. So that's an update on where we are with PRAs. I've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years on that. Any questions on PRAs before I move on to the next topic?
Yeah, Ron, I have a question. I'm assuming what you're talking about here with the designated authorized staff member, that's school district staff members.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
Josh.
as I'm sure you've heard, this has hindered our ability to get a hold of plans with a lot of districts. I'm just wondering why design professionals that the district authorizes who have FBI and DOJ background checks and can step foot on campus can't be authorized by the district to make plan requests.
Yeah,
So, do you want me to answer that, Ron? Or?
Sure, Ida, go ahead.
The Public Records Act law is very specific. And so when we carve out an exception under the narrow provisions of how it's accepted, we have to specify that narrow exception. And so it's narrowed down to the owner of the documents because this is a school safety issue. And our goal is twofold. Number one is to have school districts understand who is requesting those documents, because under the PRA process, we can't ask who, we can't ask why, we can't ask why they need them. So limiting them only to school districts preserves that safety issue. And it doesn't allow for exception. It has to be a closed list. I apologize that it makes it difficult for our clients to get those drawings. Hopefully it's not increasingly difficult because the process really is meant to have the school district already be in an authorized list, receive the documents and transfer them directly to the design professional and hopefully retain them even in their own files so that in the future they're also more easily accessible to them, even though we will always retain the electronic files. My point is, Josh, that it was all or nothing. It couldn't be, oh, we'll give them to school districts. Yeah, we'll give them to the design professionals too. It's not a pick and choose. It is a very narrow exception that had to go through a lot of legal review to be in concert with the Public Records Act request. And for us, I apologize for the difficulty, but we believe the added school safety for it, because the other alternative is all right, no questions asked, is really important.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Any other questions? All right, let's get on to something that I'm excited about. I know a lot of staff at DSA are excited about it because every time we want to make a change to eTracker, my answer's been, oh, the next eTracker will have that corrected. And so everybody's excited about this, and you should be too, because your interface and ability to get in and see the information at DSA about your projects is going to be very enhanced. And so what I'm talking about is a program we have at DSA. It's called eTracker. There's our tracker, eTracker. This system we implemented about 25 years ago. That's when we, as you recall, all of our old numbering system was up and from project 1 to in the 60,000s for our application numbers. And then all of a sudden, everything changed to a leader, 01, 02, 03, 04 for our 4 offices, and then a 100,000 number, a number. That coincided with eTracker rolling out about 25 years ago. So we realize it's getting archaic. It's old. It's not quite DOS-based system, but it just needs to be refreshed and really pull in all these other things we have at DSA into one central area. It does a pretty good job of doing that now, but it can be better. And if you're used to using eTracker from the outside, right, probably the most common thing you go there for is to check the status of your project and plan review. There's other features in there that you may or may not know about. If you're looking for a school and project inspector for your region, you can go look at who's available. There's availability list on our website. There's also a list of the inspectors in your region. Our LEA lab program, right, our laboratory acceptance program. If you need a lab to do material testing on one of your projects, you can go find a local lab. There's a plan review fee calculator, various things like that. So it's really going to get enhanced. And so we're embarking on this effort. We've been working on it for about a year and a half or two years about. And we're about a year out from rolling out the first phase. And I'll talk about high level what we want to do and then dive into a little more details. And like I said, I'm pretty excited about it. The high level, if you will, issues we're trying to deal with is obviously modernize it. 2 is migrate all of our data to one spot. And that includes document storage, right? So like when we approve a set of drawings, we're not approving it within eTracker. We're making notes in eTracker like a giant database, but we're storing the files in DSA box, and you've seen it in Bluebeam, but we're putting it in Navigator's a separate file storage system. We're going to bring that into eTracker, so the files will be stored in eTracker all in one place. The other thing is, think about it now, when you go to fill out an application form for your project or forms, whatever form you're submitting to DSA is, you go download a PDF, you enter it all in, your data, you send it to us in a PDF, then our staff take it and enter that information into our current eTracker system. Let's just cut out all the intermediate steps and you log in, you enter in the information for your forms, and then you submit it to us, and then one of our staff confirm the data in it and accept it. Right, so that's where we're going. And so you're gonna have an external login, you're gonna have external dashboards. If you're a school district, you're gonna be able to go pull up all of your projects that are currently in plan review, ones that are registered, ones that are approved, not gone to construction yet. What's in construction, which ones that finished construction are waiting on certification. You'll have dashboards that you can see all your projects in your district that are in different phases at DSA for your work. So right now you go in and you enter in one project at a time to find out this information. This is going to be really a big step forward for all of us. I mentioned this in 2 phases. So the first phase is implementing most of the things we just talked about, improving the interface. We're going to roll in all kinds of other things in there, right? We have a DSA certification database that's separate from eTracker now. We have our own way of keeping track of all the certification on your legacy projects and so forth. That's going to all get pulled into one common place, one common brain, if you will. We have accounting processes that could use improvement, right? There's invoices and doing hand things on invoices. That's all going to get rolled into this. So that's phase 1, is really bringing in all these systems in one place and then keeping the current functionality the way it is. And then the second phase is where you're going to see a lot of these improvements about having your own dashboard and all these forms being integrated and direct entry, if you will. So I want to touch on high level and then go into a little bit of detail and schedule and then I'll get into some more refinement that I think you'll find useful. look, just broadly speaking, we have some of you probably have worked with Paul Rooney. He's a staff member here at DSA. He's a supervising structural engineer. He's been around for a long time, almost 20 years, and he's leading the effort in our end. He meets with staff in all of our offices trying to pull all this together. And then we have a couple contractors and ETS, which is an Enterprise Technology Solutions, which is a DGS group that helps with a lot of the development and programming as well. So we have a pretty big team working on it. Look, the schedule, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail and I'll circle this, but this is the phase we're in now, phase 1. And we're really targeting middle of next year of rolling this out. So all of our staff will migrate everything over and be ready to start on the new eTracker build at that time. That'll be phase 1. And then phase 2 will be rolling out the next in 2026 and 2027 mostly. And that's going to be where we start rolling out forms. We're going to be rolling out your external dashboards and workflows. This isn't necessarily in the order of which we'll roll these things out. Certainly, the forms that we use the most at DSA will be the forms we input first, and then work our way down the list, if you will. So that's high-level schedule on the 2 phases. This is our current phase 1 schedule we're working at. We're really shooting for the end of Q2 to roll this out. A lot of steps, a lot of processing, a lot of validation. It takes a lot of work to make sure all the data transfers over correctly. This is another version of schedule. I don't need to get into too much. Things that you'll be interested in are these dashboards the external portal here. That's where you're going to really have that interface with you and your projects. All right. I'll go back one. You'll notice there's this thing that says AB 247. So prop 2, I'm sorry, and AB 247. And you've heard it a little bit already from a few other speakers about, Dan mentioned it, and I think Eric did as well, about a master plan that needs to be included with your OPSC applications. And that really needs to forcing us, and in a good way, to create unique building identifiers for every building on your campus. And that is so that OPSC, CDE, and DSA's systems can talk to each other. Because right now we don't have a common number or anything like that to cross-reference all of our databases together. And that this is going to help make that work better between our agencies and groups. And so you'll be submitting master plans to OPSC. You've probably heard this several times by OPSC in their recent presentations. So we're working on implementing that into eTracker. And so what does that mean? As we sit here today, if you came to DSA and said, I want to know every application number that impacted my gym at Smith High School, it would take some research to figure that out, right? We need to we don't keep track of individual buildings, we keep track of projects. And where we're going is by building, not application number is not going to change. You're still going to submit a project to DSA for a whole school site. None of that will change. But in our database, every building part of that application will have that A number associated with it. So in 10 years, 20 years from now, you'll be able to look at one building and know every application number that's included work on that one building. And so that'll be very helpful for certainly all the school districts and design professionals working with them. And so maybe not to get your brain trained on the next slide is, if you think about, we need to come up with a number to associate with each building. And we could go from high level focus down to a narrow one and figuring out what that A number is, or not the A number, the unique identifier, like school county ID number, then the site ID number, and then a building number. But the problem is we have a lot of modular buildings and they get moved around from site to site. So having a unique identifier built on that principle kind of breaks down because it's no longer, it may even be in a different county, it might be in a different school district altogether. And so what made more sense as we worked with OPSC on this is we create a unique identifier based on the original A number that built that building. So your unique identifier looks something like this. So the 4, that's the regional office number, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the next 6 digits is the A number for which that building was built. So this was 04102377. And then that application number may have built 10 buildings. So this is the second building of those 10. So that's the unique identifier to be assigned to a particular building. So if we look at that, what's that look like on a regular project? So let's say we have a project at this school down here, Park Avenue, and and this unique identifier is only going to be applied to enclosed buildings, not shade canopies, poles, those sort of things. So say the project's going to alter a toilet building and it's going to construct a new classroom building. Constructing a new classroom building is easy. That's going to be assigned a unique identifier that's tied directly to this new application number, right? These are the same numbers, right? 412421 that's the same as the A number, and then it's only one building on this project they're proposing. So it'll be A01. That'll be the number for the life of that building. Say there's a toilet building, and that one was built a long time ago under an older A number, and that's this unique identifier. So on a plan, you jump over here. There's a site plan. Let's say you have a new classroom here, and over here is the toilet building. So that will have this unique building identifier associated with it, the one I just showed you on the previous slide. And then here's the A number based on, unique identifier based on the A number that originally built that relo. And so you see all the red numbers on here, you would show on your site plan these numbers instead of the original A number. You can certainly keep the A numbers for the life of it, like you've seen here and it's traditionally done, but we'll be putting this unique building number for each one. That will help, like I said, tie all the data together. It'll also make it useful for you in trying to figure out what work's been done to that building over the life of the building. I'd also make it easier for us to track and you to track when buildings and manufacturers to track when reloads get moved from site to site. This number will stay with that building over its lifetime. So that's, I guess that's in essence of what this is going to look like. If I take this a step further for you guys, this is what it'll look like to you. When you go in, and us, we'll go into the new eTracker. This is giving you an insight of what the new platform will look like. You'll have pull down menus across the top and the side. Let's say you have this particular school district. Let's give you an example. Say it's Desert Sands Unified School District. This will be their owner profile. So if you're the school district, you can go in, you'll see all of your school sites and your campus and your district. They'll all be given a unique site ID number, which we'll assign. And then if let's just click on, say, Indio High School and look at that campus. You would get, so here's Indio High School and that district. Every building on that site is listed here, all the building types, and you'll have a unique identifier for every building on that site. And then you can have your own building identifier that you change over time, right? Because this classroom buildings is building 300. You might decide you want to go to A, B, C, D and change that. That's fine. That number can change. You can change the use that's in the building over time, right? That happens occasionally. But this number, this unique identifier that I'm pointing at now, will always be tied to that building. And so this kind of gives you insight of what that looks like. And you'll be able to manage it in the future when you get the portal locked in. I did mention we're going to do a bunch of forms, right? So we're going to roll a lot of DSA forms into direct entry. I'm not going to get into all the numbers, but this is what you'll see as an input, a way to input your project type for a DSA application. Your architect would go in, input all this directly into the system. We'll receive a notice that, hey, this application's been submitted to DSA. We'll go confirm the data and then accept the application. I'm looking forward to this. I know our staff are. You, whether you're an architect, an engineer, a geotechnical engineer, laboratory inspector, you'll have your own login. You'll log into the system, and then you'll be able to have a dashboard. So say you're a design professional, an architect, say, you can log in every project that you have currently active at DSA. You'll have a dashboard that shows you, say you have 4 or 5 projects registered, they'll all be listed here. You know, what each of their phases you'll be able to toggle through, whether, and also CCDs, addendums, revision, and so forth. That's eTracker. That's where we're heading. I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope you are as well. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to go through those.
I think this is really exciting and really great to consolidate all this and update it. I think it's really great, like, vision with this. I have a question on the dashboard piece. Will it eventually show like all of your projects and what's certified and what's not certified when you log in for that?
I believe so, buddy. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think Paul's reached out. I know you're one of the folks he's reached out to in this build. Probably been a year or more now since he did that. But I think when we get to the dashboard development in the next phase, he'll be pulling in a group of professionals, both school districts, design professionals. I know you're on his list. Yeah,
Excellent.
certainly pull you in to brainstorm of what you want to see.
Great, that'd be excellent. And then as far as, so right now we use Box to upload documents. We use Bluebeam Sessions for plan check and uploading CCDs and getting those approvals. How does that change, or how does that integrate into this, or does that just stay the way it is moving into this new eTracker platform?
Your initial submittal will go directly into eTracker. It won't go into Box. I believe if we keep everything the same way, the Bluebeam, I think that, I'm not sure on the Bluebeam yet. We haven't got that far down the road yet.
Okay.
I would prefer things get uploaded into eTracker. What happens with Bluebeam is if you upload a document into a session, say a new CCD, and you upload it into session, we get an email notification that something was uploaded, then one of our staff have to go in and move it. And we had a hiccup with Bluebeam earlier this summer where they just stopped sending us emails. And so
Right.
a couple of weeks went by and people started calling us, hey, where's this CCD number? And we're like, what do you mean? And we didn't receive an email notification. So there was a little bit of time there where we had to retrace our steps and sort that out. So I'd prefer to skip that dependence and have it directly into our system.
That'd be really excellent if you upload the initial submittal, addenda, revision, CCDs, if it all went into eTracker. And then if they were disapproved, then maybe a session comes out in Bluebeam with the disapproved drawing sets with the comments that you address, and then somehow get that approved record back into eTracker. So you have just really a one-stop shop with everything filed in one place. I think it's really excellent. So
that's the idea. Everything will be in eTracker. All right. All right, buddy, are you done? Sorry.
I'm done, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, buddy. All right.
I just had a question about the availability and the timing of DSA approved plans. So although there'll be the dashboard and there will be the file system and the organizing capabilities, we have had just a little bit of a hiccup, and I'm not trying to be negative Nancy, because I really am an advocate for DSA, but there has been time that we hadn't anticipated from when we were stamped out in the office at backcheck to when the documents became digitally available to our contractors. And so when we're doing, like we did the summer crunch projects, that became real critical. And I'm sure some of it was the district's fault. We probably didn't have maybe our safety plan or something like that in place. But I'm just wondering if it would reduce any of that time from when they walk out of back check to when they're in the dashboard for distribution?
Yeah, the way the process works currently is it's usually within 24 hours of stamp out or the in-person back check. We will process the plans, put a stamp on them, and then we upload them in a couple places that your team can access. One, we upload it into the DSA, into the session in Bluebeam, and we also upload it to Box, which your design team will have access to. And that usually happens within 24 hours, certainly no more than 2 days. If it is, you need to let me know, because that I have a dashboard that shows how long that takes, and I'm always
Tracking.
scanning it.
Okay.
And then I'll send you, and the other regional managers will send you an approval letter within 5 days. So
Yeah.
if those,
And-
if we're, yeah. So I think that will still, that 24 hours or thereabouts still will happen, because somebody needs to put a stamp on the plans. But we'll probably be putting the approved plans, rather than in Box, we'll be putting them into eTracker. So you'll see them directly in eTracker.
Yeah, understood. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mara. Laura?
Couple quick things. So you guys will assign the unique number.
Correct.
Okay. And then zooming out a little bit, I know one of the goals in Prop 2 is to get somewhere close to a statewide inventory. Obviously, this would be a big help in that pursuit. Is there any discussions with OPSC or CD or anyone about the extension of the data for each unique building? And I guess square footage is the one I'm thinking of off the top of my head.
So
sorry, I didn't put you in the middle of
no,
the
we've had
statewide
these-
inventory, but
Yeah, so it's hard to go backwards and capture all this data. Certainly, the new buildings will have square footage inputted into our system. So over time, it will grow. I believe we have a square footage entry for all of our buildings. And when we're creating the dashboards as we speak, I'm meeting with Paul Rooney tomorrow to go through this. And that was one of the things we just talked about 2 days ago, is about when you submit on a campus for the first time, you're going to need to give us a site plan with all the original A numbers for each building, so we can build the data for your site and assign the unique identifiers for every building on that particular site. And when we do that, we're going to need to know what the building number is, what the use of the building is, and we haven't decided whether we're going to require the square footage or not. And that would be your question there. If we had the square footage, then we'll have a square footage inventory over time being developed. So it's what I understand is you would like that square footage, or it'd be beneficial to not only DSA, but AIA or
agents
CASH or other agencies, correct?
it just feels like that zooming out is been the goal for a while, and I don't see how else we get there if you guys don't help lead it with the applications. I recognize square footage of buildings changes over time and all of that, but it's as close as we may get.
Yes. Yeah. I'll make sure we include that field when we do the inventory on each site as it goes.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all. I'm looking forward to this moving forward. So I am going to advance a slide and hand this over to Kurt.
All right. Guess that makes me the closer. Typically, we look at escalation through our eyes, and what we can do about it is delay. We try very hard to not be a source of delay, an impediment, or a bottleneck. Ron's example there with eTracker, we hope to be more efficient with that. What we've done in the past with our electronic plan review and our appointment system, all of those things are our way of participating as best we can to avoid and prevent delay and the consequence of delay, which is escalation in cost of construction, because we know that doesn't buy another book, build another classroom, or educate another child. But what we'd like to hear from you is the impact of cost escalation. Now, the regional managers have weighed in on what they see, and in the next slide here, you'll see what we're hearing, but there's another slide where we'd like to hear more from you. Ron, since you are basically the author of a lot of this information, I am going to pass this off to you because you're in the trenches. So would you take that one over for me, please?
Sure. Certainly over the last 6 months or so, we've seen a lot of projects that are being impacted by the cost escalation. And what that's been looking like from our end is we're seeing projects being de-scoped. Sometimes that's during plan review. We have clients saying, stop, we need to hit pause on this project. Or it goes to bid, bids come in high, and we're seeing significant revisions to the plans. If this happens to your project, please reach out to us. Let's have a meeting to figure out a schedule when you're going to submit that revision. If you're submitting a major change like that, let's plan that out so we have the staff ready when you submit the revision to get that done. The other one we're seeing in some of our pre-app meetings is projects being split up and they're bidding it in pieces. So they'll bid one part that they know they have to build for whatever demand they have for housing students on campus. And then maybe their wish list is a separate project. So we're seeing a lot of this splitting of projects, whether it's in increments or in complete separate projects for the same site. We've certainly seen some projects that are just going to get DSA approval and sit on it until they hope the climate might change. Keep in mind that after 4 years, the project will be voided if it does not go to construction. And then the other one that's been coming up a lot is the 50% replacement cost trigger. I think Laura mentioned that earlier about the geohazard report part, but if the 50% replacement cost trigger is evaluated during plan review, it also gets checked when the DSA 102 form comes in, which is when your construction cost has been determined. If your construction costs have gone up a lot because of the bidding climate, all of a sudden your project that was at, say, 45% replacement cost under the trigger, all of a sudden now you're like, well, now my project cost is 65%. I'm over the trigger. Do I need to go now make this a rehabilitation? If that happens, again, meet with us. You can reassess the replacement cost of the building to compare with your alteration cost after the bids are received, as long as you're escalating all those costs or to the same date and time, same period. We don't want to be escalating one to a different date than the other, but if you need to reassess your replacement costs, then we can certainly do that. We're looking at updating IREB 4, I take that back, about when these costs be reevaluated and maybe putting a bulletin together on how to deal with that. So that's what we're seeing on our
end. So this is primarily a question to the design professionals and the builders on the call. Considering these questions, starting off with number one, we're looking for direction from you to the districts and to ourselves as well. So I would like you, if you would please, starting with the architects to weigh in on the first question.
I'll jump in. I think escalation is still difficult to predict with the various tariffs that come and go. We're still seeing like long lead times on equipment that drive schedules, still 52 plus weeks on electrical gear and such. So it puts a lot of pressure to do some of the incremental submittals, as you're saying, where we're packaging and really risking like designing that electrical gear up front without the certainty of exactly what's in that increment too. So there's challenges with that. it seems like volatility is still going to be fairly extreme over the next 12 to 24 months from what we're seeing. It's just labor shortages, supply chain unpredictability, and just inflationary pressures in general is what we're seeing a lot of.
I think the same is true here. I do think a lot of the marketplace right now is fully bond funded, and we're seeing districts acknowledge having to spend more on the projects on the front end of their bond and making hard choices about what falls off. So the total quantity of projects may go down and the value of each individual project will go up. So far, we've been able, with the strategies Buddy was talking about, to manage with increments how we deliver them and work to VE or get them into price. I will say the site work component, and I don't know, Buddy, if you're seeing that on your end, but the site work component is probably the most unpredictable and the fastest rising part of our project. So when we put in an increment 1 that's grading, utilities, demolition, whatever, is staggering, right? What that first increment is eating up. And sometimes that is impacting our future increments in terms of now what do we have left, right, to work with. So I think, I don't know if others are seeing that, but we're seeing site work really off the charts.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the same thing with the site work, especially. It's just gobbling up project budgets. We're definitely experiencing like projects being downsized before we move into schematics. Let's say with the school district we work for, we might give them 4 options from $1 sign to $5 signs. And even going into the meeting, they're like, you know, we're having so many cost overruns, we're going with the $1 sign or the $2 sign option. The more expensive options just aren't even going to be on the table because their programs are just being hit so hard with the escalation that we've experienced over the last few years, especially. So there's a lot of downsizing of project scope in attempt to align project budgets.
Are you thinking like when you say that from grubbing to finished grading or beyond?
No, a lot of beyond. All of the site work encompassing is not only the grading and that, but all the site utilities, all the on-site work. You'd think like a lot of that you'd escape some of the tariffs and things because it's more like manual labor on sites and that, but it's just surprising to see how astronomical like site improvements have gotten. We're at the point where we're budgeting $2 to $3 million an acre. Sometimes an acre. This used to be like in the $500,000 to $700,000 range. And honestly, like even when we're in the $2 to $3 million range, we're undershooting in some cases when we're just budgeting projects from the beginning.
Yep.
Because all this aging infrastructure has to get replaced a lot of times when we come onto a site, when we're replacing stormwater, we're having to put in all these massive underground detention basins and such that are just expensive components on a site, upgrading all the infrastructure, electrical, low voltage, all these systems. But go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so our district was anticipating the escalation, and we are not a district who went out for a bond last year, so they decided they wanted to spend all their money in one summer. And so we did 28 multi-purpose room equipment upgrades. We did with DLR, with Buddy's team, a dirt wall system project, but essentially they were afraid of all the escalation. So we jammed in $70 million worth of work in over 45 days this last summer. across 30 sites. Quite the challenge, but that's what they wanted to make sure they didn't get hit by the escalation. So this summer, you guys are going to have a break from Newport Mesa because we have no more money to spend, Ron. So you won't have 45 projects coming in December. So you guys can at least experience that positive impact from this last summer. But an example of one of those projects we did at Newport Coast Elementary School through a lease-back contract, which we divided our district into zones by the high school zone. We had one site where we were removing and replacing playground structures in the littles area and the upper grade area. And so removing those, putting new ones in, and putting shade over them. We utilized CMAS contracts to purchase and install the playground structures and shade structures themselves. But all the site work was done by the general contractor. The site work alone for that particular site with the general contractor scope of work was half of the construction costs. So very little ADA improvements, some demo, and rebuilding the foundations for the play and shade improvements. And we were at probably close to a $4 million project. So very minor scope, and that's with the lease-back contract, where you at least get a qualified contractor to perform the work. I think it also depends on your procurement method as well.
I know we're going to run a little past out of respect. Rush through these, but not. Nick, could you weigh in on that question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to respond to Ara, and it's interesting to hear that a majority of that was lease-back. That's an added complication for us at the moment because of skilled and trained requirements. You diminish that labor pool. And I think I heard Buddy and Laura say the same thing about labor. That's been the largest impact for us, finding qualified workers for these projects.
We got really creative. If you want to have a chat with me, I can tell you about the 2:30 a.m. meetings and work nights that got us to this success, but I'd be happy to chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as an example, 2 years ago, we were doing about 50-50 between multi-prime and leaseback. And today we are doing 95% leaseback. And then you add in the complication to PLAs, you just further diminish the labor pool.
Yeah, I don't think anyone else in Southern California got any shade structures except for Newport Mesa this summer because we snagged them pretty early.
Any others want to weigh in? Okay, we'll move to question 2. So how can DSA's process be improved to limit the impact? Anybody notice anything about our process that's impediment? Oh, good. Good to hear. Okay, so we'll move on to 3.
My experience, unfortunately, was an architect who impacted our scheduling. And I went and made some surprise visits in the fact check room, and it was very evident that it was not DSA. I'm happy to say that.
If it was the other way, we'd want to hear about it.
Yeah, I would tell you.
I know. Third question, in considering the 50% replacement cost.
I'm up to my earballs in this one right now.
Yeah,
I was going to say I had some thoughts on this one as well.
I think that we've got the form, we've got the cost estimators working toward the 50 or the replacement cost value, and nothing in the real world seems to say that their calculations align with what we're seeing in the marketplace. $840 for a building in Marin on liquefied soil, yada, yada, when we're dropping $1,200 for wood frame schools in the valley. I'm not sure we're quite there yet on the calculation. I know we have a chance to come in and talk about it and bring our comps and all of that, but we're early, right? We've got some time, but I just wonder for others who have been through it multiple times, that seems to be our big barrier, is that the prescribed calculation methodology seems light to me. I don't know, Buddy, if you've had the same experience.
If I'm
I think it
understanding,
depends on what you're trying to achieve. If some districts don't want to replace their building, some districts do. So
I'm trying to get the replacement cost as high as possible, so my 50% threshold is as high as possible before triggering the full rehabilitation.
if I'm understanding the question correctly, this is geared towards what happens when we've reached an agreement, but then it goes out to bid and it goes over the estimate. Is that the way the question is structured?
I think you can look at it before and after. What can we do?
How do we, the way I'm reading the question is, what kind of limitations should be placed on that nightmare scenario where we were under 50% replacement cost? We didn't do a full mandatory rehab, and then it went out to bid, and all of a sudden it came in higher than we said it was going to cost, but the cost estimate, and now it exceeds 50%. So we've triggered a rehab on a project that's DSA approved, that was DSA approved not to be rehabbed. Is that the way the question's structured? Yeah. So my thought in that case is that the bidding environment was something far different from what the estimator anticipated. So that means his estimate for the replacement cost is equally as far off. So I think in that case, it would make sense to we're not trying to bypass the intent of the code, which hopefully will in a upcoming code cycle, this won't be an issue anymore, I'm hoping. But as long as it is, I think that there should be an adjustment to the replacement cost that takes into account that change in the bidding environment that resulted in it going over 50% in the first place. And that only seems fair. It's not, again, not trying to avoid anything, but trying to stick with the intent of the code and do an apples for apples comparison.
And how to prove all of the things that we need to do to make those things align.
Yeah. Otherwise, the only thing you can do is really add greater contingency percentage.
Yeah, we're always pushing for don't go over 40% because we know something's going to happen somewhere, but ultimately that's not our decision.
No.
It's our recommendation.
Okay.
And Josh, this is Ron. We've had these discussions with all the principals here at DSA about allowing that recalculation to occur after the bids, and we're definitely on board with that. And so our current IR EB4 doesn't say you can do that, but we're going to change it that you can do that. You can recalculate it after the bids come in. Yeah, so we're on board with that. I think especially since we already solved this issue during plan review, that it's under 50% replacement cost. We got to make sure that, because some districts might game the system and try and make things look better, and then they go bid it and it comes in way over. But if the bidding climate's gone up, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to recompute your rehab costs. Yeah.
And would that be tried to the construction cost index, or how would we prove the bidding climate differential? I think that's where the questions come up. Is it just sitting down and negotiating it, or is there some factor? Because
I think
Maybe
that
just if you
tariffs,
receive multiple bids and they're within the realm of each other.
I think that's some food for thought, right? Is how do we prove it? Other than saying, hey, you guys, you've seen the headlines, right? It's a bad climate. Yeah.
But most teams will have a cost estimator on board, and so they should be aware of the cost climate, and so they should be able to recompute that. If we see, I'm not surprised anymore when I start seeing $1,200 a square foot or even higher in LA. I've heard of numbers getting close to 2,000 a square foot for some of the fire rebuilds. So unfortunately, if we do have a cost estimator on retainer at DSA that we can use to confirm the numbers you're putting together. So if you're shooting, if you came to DSA and said $900 a square foot is a replacement cost, and then you went out and bid the project, everything went up, and you recompute that 900 to 1,200, and it all seems reasonable, then we move on, and you're still under 50%. If we think that number's way off for some reason, we'll pull in our cost estimator, we have a retainer to review it. And some of you use that same cost estimator on your project. So it should be they should have their pulse on the market. So that's how we would navigate it. Look, the 50% replacement cost trigger is not a good measure, but it's the only one we have. And so we come up with something different. That's where we find ourselves.
And the off the record conversations would probably be related to more, what is the building type? Are we talking about a light wood frame building, or are we talking about masonry walls with a wood roof that really should have been rehabilitated in the first place? I would imagine there's going to be a little bit more leeway in the light wood framed building, single story light wood framed.
And this is what we were talking about on this committee a couple of years ago too, is that it just doesn't, some things just don't make sense.
Yeah.
I would agree with Josh.
Are we the problem?
If you came in with a non-ductile concrete building built in the 60s, I'm probably going to dig my heels in a little harder than if you have a one-story wood frame building.
Yeah.
That's fair, right? The whole idea is to promote seismic safety and not dump a bunch of money into a collapse hazard building. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Just to throw another issue in the ring, a lot of times these estimators are not looking at our schedules. So we might have a client where we put a schedule out and we say, hey, I need 20 months to build this. And they go, you only get 16. And so now we're cramming all that work into a shorter period, which is going to escalate the cost.
Yeah.
That does complicate the replacement cost estimate. Because then
that's a
you
great
assume
point.
that it's an accelerated schedule on the replacement cost, which that's strange. Or you back that escalated amount for the accelerated schedule on the main project back out of it for comparison purposes.
You're also going to eliminate bidders because not everyone can keep pace like that,
And
which will escalate the cost.
Sometimes it's accelerated, but sometimes it's also dragged out because of phasing and moving kids around. That also adds overhead and other costs. So I think it's a good point. The schedule's an important part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the other aspect of the cost that I don't think is considered whatsoever is interim housing. That doesn't even come into the conversation of a cost associated with these projects, which most of us don't have empty schools that we can just move an entire school to. So I think that's the other piece of this. I know when we were going through this, I was like, how could they say, no, this isn't part of the cost? Like, how are we supposed to do this? And then just all the other elements to make repairs when you're rehabilitating a project, it's the repair specific, not everything that you have to remove and put back together that is included in the calculation. So it's counterintuitive, it feels like, when you're going through that exercise.
Last question. What can districts do better?
a lot. Educate our boards so they don't have unrealistic expectations.
Plan reasonable DSA submission timing would be a good one.
Don't hire architects in September and expect them to have plans into DSA by December.
Be a better client,
There's
be
a lot
sure,
we
is
could
what you're
do.
saying.
I think one thing that helps the project scoping part of it, at least better plan and scope their projects, goes back to something Ron's always said about when you're doing a master plan, an evaluation of the existing buildings from a seismic standpoint should be part of it. It shouldn't just be technology and programming. It should also include, are these buildings that have a collapse potential, and should seismic rehabilitation be figured into it? Because that can have a huge impact on the budget if it triggers a mandatory rehab later on.
Yeah, have an early programming phase is definitely important for all of our projects. And getting the feedback, the input, all those meetings that you have to have, the community meetings, building that into your schedules so that they're realistic schedules, looking at when board dates are, if you have to present to the board. I have some typical schedules that I've developed, and I tell the board, this schedule only is true from the day that you approve the budget and the scope. Otherwise, this schedule is not real. For us, it comes down to really educating our board and having them support what their staff is telling them is reasonable and appropriate.
I think it's helpful for us too to have the contractor on earlier, just so we can capture market rate pricing. They tend to have the most pulse on the market and what they're seeing in regards to pricing and labor availability, as well as like really fleshing out like on maybe longer, larger duration projects where you really do need to work out the phasing. So having that build partner to really like dial in what those phases look like and to understand and have consensus with the district on what reasonable durations are on the project, so that there aren't like a lot of cost overruns on accelerating the project. So there's a balance sometimes, and we don't always get that exactly right if we don't have that build partner to collaborate with as well.
I'd like to clarify my previous comments. So reasonable DSA submission timelines, meaning there's enough time for the architect to capture our constructability comments. One of the things that Doug Humphreys drilled into me is we build by change order. That's because we're not allowing reasonable timeframes up front for those constructability comments to be addressed, and they just turn into RFIs that need to be addressed later down the line through the CCD process. Which makes it pain for us, and I'm sure the architects as well.
Great, thank you. Anything else from anyone else? All right, Andrew, I'll turn it back over to you, which means exit spotlight, correct?
Yeah, that wraps up everything. If you wanted some closing remarks, Kurt. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. I thought this was a really engageful discussion here at the end. Hopefully we can piggyback off this for future meetings, and I appreciate all your time. And have a great day. Thank you for staying a little later.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Great, thank you, everybody. Ryan, can you stay on the call?
Me, yeah.
Yeah. Just Ron, Tina. Hey. Tina? Tina? Check out.
Hey, Tina, log off the call, okay?
Sorry. Hey. I don't know what's going on there. On the educate me here, please, on the 50%. Are we part of the problem? I'm listening. I'm just wondering if maybe we need to look at our criteria.
I got a few things to say about the 50% replacement costs that are, maybe I'll start off with this. First off is using cost as a measure to when to trigger a rehab is fraught with inaccuracies, and it's a tool. It's what it is. It's a tool to say, hey, if you're going to renew this building for another 50 years, right? You're doing such a major change to it. You're extending the useful life of the building. You need to not only renew the electrical, mechanical, plumbing systems like you're planning to, but you also need to renew the structural safety of the building. And so what's a measure of that? And so the code has had this cost trigger for a long time. Ours is set at 50%. CSU and UC have a companion provision. They use 25% as the threshold. 25 is a pretty low bar, like it's a pretty high bar, depending on which way you're looking at it, but it sends a lot of buildings to get rehabbed for their campuses. Ours is at 50. So what happens in ours is you get some pretty significant alterations where you're right around that number, one side of it or not. And some clients didn't plan well, so they fight to the death to stay under the 50% because they didn't plan for this in their budget. And so and then they start playing with the numbers and showing that the building's below it, but as soon as it goes to bid and you get real numbers, it's way over. Those people, it's like, look, redo your numbers. If it needs to be rehab, let's rehab it. And then other people, they're doing a good job and they're under the 50% and it goes to bid, bids come in high, they're not over, so we recompute it, And so there's that gamemanship that kind of goes on with it. And so what I've proposed, Diane and myself have proposed, is to change this to work area. And it's just work area is not a number that's moving around. It's like if you're modifying more than 50% of the work area in that building, you trigger a rehab. So people will know from the beginning of their project whether they're in a rehab bucket or not, because there's no cost volatility involved. So if we go that route, we need to define what is the work area, right? If you're doing carpet, paint, TI, like plain stuff, maybe that doesn't count towards the work area. But if you start replacing the entire ceiling, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, that area should be considered part of the work area. So you need, now we're not dealing with cost, we're defining what the work area is. That's perhaps a better way to do it. So that in the confines of what we are able to influence right now with our regs, I think that would be a solution we could fix. What the state of California, in my mind, really needs is we need a rehabilitation program, like what SB 1953 is for hospitals. That program had its flaws, but at the end of the day, over 40 years, it's going to get the hospitals on right the ship, if you will. We need a similar thing for schools, but that's beyond DSA's realm of influence, other than that's legislative action that would have to happen unless DSA were to be able to work with a legislator or propose what the framework for that program would be. This is what I've always pushed for, Kurt, is we should develop the framework for what that program should be.
Mhm.
So when there is the next earthquake and there is motivation to do something like that, that there is framework already ready to go, because you know better than me, the mindset of legislators are what's here and now, what's going on today. And
Right.
they're not going to think about seismic safety when there hasn't been an earthquake in California in a major metropolitan area since '94 earthquake. I think if we got ahead of the game and we're ready, that if we had that, right? Because really it's about targeting the hazardous buildings. Like I could care less, to be honest, about the one-story wood frame buildings that have plywood shear walls. It's like those buildings aren't a hazard unless it's maybe a soffit or something like that. But the building itself's not coming down. It's just the non-structural stuff on it that might fall off. The buildings that are scary, right, are the old concrete and masonry buildings that are very heavy. And we talked about lift slab. We've talked about a whole bunch of different type of buildings. Those are the scary buildings that, you know, high potential for loss of life. Those need to get fixed, but there's no mandatory requirement to do that. So right now, the cost, we can't just do away with the cost trigger. We need to replace it with something else. And I like the work area method. It's going to take a lot of work to get it to be right. And it's going to probably take a little bit of a battle at the building adoption process, the code adoption process, but
Who would fight us?
I think it depends on how restrictive it ends up being, right? The school districts might be opposed to it because right now they can mess with some numbers and maybe make it go away. Whereas if we were overly stringent on what was determined the work area, they might be like, you're going to make me rehab every building. So I think they would be interested in what that definition is. That's the California existing or the international existing building code and the CEBC have a work area method in there. It's very vague. It would need to be adapted to work in our program, but those things just aren't well defined. The other thing right now, Kurt, is we have I believe it's a procedure that was drafted for how to deal with these costs. And really there's 4 points in time where the costs become an issue. So 4. So one is during plan review. The second one is after the project gets bid. The third is during construction, right? Because sometimes we've had them open up a wall and it's all dry rot and this project's, their scope just went through the roof. That we've had those trigger a rehab, and rightfully so, they should have been in some of those. And then fourth is at the end of construction. I tell you what, we're not going to check the cost at the end of construction. We're not going to make somebody tear apart a building they just finished and make them go rehabilitate it and tear off new finishes. It's just, that'd be a political firestorm. So where we are right now today in where this procedure, as I see it, is we check it at plan review like we have been. We check it when it goes to bid like we talked about today. And then we don't check it anymore after that, other than if something's discovered in construction that blows up their scope, right? Because that's the only time we would check it. We never check it again. So that, if we follow in those guide rails, I think we'll be able to work in our current framework. It's pretty benign, but it'll take a lot of work to switch to a work area method. So anyway, that's how I see it all.
I just think there's got to be a better way to give clarity and certainty to this.
But
maybe I'm Pollyannish about it, but
so to determine, this is all about taking the cost of your cost of the work to a building and comparing it to the replacement cost of the building. And the problem all lies in the replacement cost, in that we have a couple methods they can use, right? OPSC numbers, which are like $500 a square foot. You can't build anything for that. And so everybody's stuck with a method we created to say, hey, look, just do an estimate to basically rebuild the building you have there now so you can get a replacement cost. And that lets them really push those numbers up to the $800, $900 a square foot. That's not uncommon. So they're in control of that number, right? They can push that number up. If we see numbers getting too crazy high, then we pull in our cost estimator to check it. But unless we talked before about having the cost estimator determine the cost per square foot to publish it, but that's not going to fly because that's going to be in conflict with OPSC. But
Excuse me.
anyways, my experience has been the school districts have figured out how to navigate their way through this, and they're doing it okay. This is pretty common practice. They break down the cost per building. They show us the replacement cost. As long as they're not showing me something crazy, we let it go and move on. We've done our due diligence. Now, I tell you though, Josh was right. If I see a collapse hazard type of building, I will push really hard back on the district. I will have private conversations with the district about, you're gonna dump $5 million into this building and you've got no out-of-plane wall anchors on the roof to the walls. This is a collapse hazard. Do some voluntary strengthening to it.
You're putting lipstick on a pig.
Let's beef up the pig a little bit.
Or painting the nails on a cadaver, as I've called it in the past. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. I
Appreciate
gotta
you
jump in
putting-
another meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you putting the slide together too.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have a good one. Thanks.
You too. Bye.